Okay, Chair, we're now live on YouTube. When you're ready, would you like to start the meeting?
Thank you, Wendy. Good morning and welcome to East Devon District Council's Virtual Planning Committee on the 9th of June 2021. I'm your Chair, Councillor Eileen Wragg. I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via live streaming. Planning Committee members are here today in the Council chamber. Oh, I got interrupted, sorry. In the Council chamber at Blackdown House with other participants taking part remotely. And as well as being live streamed, the meeting is being recorded. So please bear this in mind throughout. And may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout the meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. As this planning meeting is dependent on internet connection and the power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for details. Please make sure all phones are turned off or are on silent, and make sure all microphones are muted when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and do not interrupt. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website, www.eastdevon.gov.uk. I would like to welcome Councillors Richard Lawrence. Welcome, Councillor Lawrence. Congratulations on your election result. And welcome back to Councillor Tom Wright to the committee, and a farewell to Councillors Bailey, Brown and Coleman, and thank them for their helpful contributions. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. When your name is called, please can you unmute your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present at Blackdown House. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. Thank you. Wendy, can you read out the list, please?
Thank you. I'll start with you, Councillor Wragg.
Present at Blackdown House.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
Present at Blackdown House.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Present at Blackdown House.
Thank you. Councillor De Saram.
Present at Blackdown House. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Present at Blackdown House.
Thank you. Councillor Howe. Councillor Howe.
Start speaking. Can you press that?
Wendy, he is speaking. For some reason, it's not coming through on the microphone.
Keep it live.
Okay.
But he is present.
It's a bit like touching.
Thank you.
To run it, press.
Is Lawrence or Clive down there still?
Yeah, they're on their way down now.
Okay, lovely. I'll come back to Councillor Howe. Councillor Key.
Present Blackdown House.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Present at Blackdown House.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Present at Blackdown House.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Present at Blackdown House.
Thank you. Councillor Whibley.
Present at Blackdown House.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Present at Blackdown House. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if it's too soon to come back to Councillor Howe.
Present. Can you hear me, Wendy?
I can, yes, perfect. I can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Back to you.
Thank you, Wendy. Right. The running order for today's meeting and the speakers list can be viewed under agenda item 1 on pages 4 to 5. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 5th of May 2021, pages 6 to 10. If anyone has comments on these minutes, please raise your electronic hand. Otherwise, I will take this as an indication that you agree the minutes of the previous meeting. There are no hands raised, so those minutes are agreed. Agenda item 3, apologies. Wendy, please.
Yes, we have 3 apologies. Councillor Bloxham, Councillor Pook and Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. There'll be a roll call for any declarations. So Wendy, could you start the roll call, please?
Certainly. When I call your name, if you can confirm the item number, what type of interest it is, and why you're declaring that interest. Thank you. So, Councillor Wragg, if I can start with you.
Thank you, Wendy. Only item 11, application 2015-17 full. I've been contacted by I've had several emails and phone calls about this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, the same agenda item 11, 20, 1517 full. I've also received emails and a couple of phone calls, but no other declarations of interest.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Yes, I've received the same emails on item 11, application 2015-17. And although I don't think I shall be here for it, in respect of agenda item 13, 22701, it's in Exmouth and I'm an Exmouth Town Councillor, but I have to leave at 12, so I don't think I'll be here for that one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dasaram.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. Likewise, for me, item 11, I've been lobbied because I've received various emails, and item 13, likewise, I'm an Exmouth Town Councillor, and I'm actually the committee ward member in respect to that item. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Thank you, Wendy. Item 11, I've received emails on this one, and item 13, it's a personal one, an Exmouth Town Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Yes, item 11, the applicant is known to me, also had the emails, and obviously it also relates to a secondary application of Gorst Energy, which is in my ward. Item 12, I stepped in while Councillor McLaughlin resigned, and obviously we now have the new councillor, but in the short period I represented that ward and spoke to the applicant on this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just jotting that down. Lovely. Thank you very much. Councillor Key.
Yes, Wendy. Item 11, I've been emailed, otherwise nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Wendy. Item, excuse me, agenda item number 12. I'm the ward member for this particular application, and I have spoken to the applicant on a couple of occasions to advise him about what to do when he comes online to the meeting today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Pratt.
Yes, thank you, Wendy. I've received emails in respect of item number 11,
as other councillors have. And in respect of item 9, that's 191794. I am a representative of the council on the East Devon area of natural beauty partnership.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Yes, again, with agenda item 11, I've received several emails from different sources regarding that application. And I also want to declare a personal interest after having a conversation with the monitoring officer regarding the applicant. I've known them for many years, and I need to declare an interest, which is a personal interest, to make that my position as regarding these the applicant absolutely clear from the outset. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Whibley.
Hi, yeah. Agenda item 11. I've received emails as everybody, and I've also been lobbied by a child at the school that I work for, because he lives on the route that's involved in this quite extensively. And item 13 as well. I'm an Exmouth Town Councillor.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Wright.
Yes, thank you, Wendy. Yes, similarly, item 11, I have received emails, but that's all. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. That's back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Wendy. Right, agenda item 5, matters of urgency. There are no matters of urgency to discuss. Agenda item 6, confidential exempt items. Again, no confidential or exempt items to discuss. Agenda item 7, appeals statistics, page 11 to 24. Mr. Rose to update members on the appeals statistic report, please. Mr. Rose.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Yeah, I have to report this time that there's been 3 allowed appeals and 1 dismissed. The dismissed appeal relates to a site in Exton, which follows on from committee's consideration of an application in Exton and whether it was a sustainable location. That appeal was dismissed on the basis that the location of that site in Exton for 2 dwellings wasn't considered to be sustainably located. In terms of the appeals that were allowed, the first one was Orchard Close, that related to materials, so somebody wanted to change materials to their scheme from stone to render. We felt that was out of character with the area, but the inspector allowed that. The second appeal relates to Chubbs Yard. So members will recall that. That was an application that came before you for loss of an office to a residential dwelling. The inspector allowed that appeal on the basis that he felt it was a suitable location for residential and there wouldn't be any harm from the loss of the business to the local area. And the third one relates to an enforcement notice that we served at Otter Valley, where there were various activities taking place that didn't have planning permissions. So we served an enforcement notice to cease those activities, but the inspector, although admitting that the proposal wasn't supported by the main local plan policy, felt that there were benefits there to the wider area, so it allowed that appeal. You'll also notice on there there's 1 appeal that was out of time. That's the one that was invalid, and also to note a further enforcement notice, interesting one where we served an enforcement notice against works to a listed building, but during the course of the appeal, the inspector wrote to the inspectorate and got the building delisted. So from that point of view, then there was no further action in relation to the enforcement notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. I see that there's 1 hand up. Councillor Key?
Yes, can I just sort of say that I think we were all very, very disappointed on the Otter Valley one, because in actual fact, I mean, I'm not quite sure what the inspector was thinking about, but it was completely obvious that he had no idea of the situation, and it was very, very unfortunate that it was allowed, because it was a disgraceful decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Right, now we move into the application part of the meeting. Agenda item 11, application 2015-17, full. It's a minor application, land south of Rixonford Lane, Upton Pine, and that's on page 84. So I'd like to welcome to the meeting Mr. Ham. Hope you can. Do I need to speak up, Mr. Ham? You're on mute. I will
Right.
speak.
Yes, you can hear me now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Sally Daldorf, Troy Stewart, who doesn't look a day older, Councillor Graham Barnell from Mid Devon District Council, Councillor Bob Short, Upton Pine Parish Council, Councillor Roger Cashmore, the adjoining Newton St Size Parish Council, and Ward Member Councillor Fabian King. Chris Rose, can you present your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can see my screen. So we've got an application here for construction of a digestate lagoon, approximately 80 metres by 40 metres, with an adjoining hard standing and surrounded by 2-metre fencing. It's before you because there's an objection from the ward member. The view is contrary to our officer recommendation. And as you can see on the screen there, isolated location, and it relates to an agricultural field off Rixonford Lane. And for your information, the boundary between East Devon and Mid Devon is the road there. So to the south of the site is East Devon and to the north is Mid Devon. And the proposal is to store digestate from the Enfield Farm anaerobic digestion plant. And if I just go through the photo, so here's the lagoon. It's covered, enclosed by the fencing. There's an access hard standing for vehicles to come in, and then the digestate is pumped in and out of the lagoon. So you can see there the profile of it, and again the access in off the road to the parking area. And then you can see here various photos that leading up to the site of the narrowness of Rixonford Lane as it leads up to the site. So single track, and then you get an idea of the rural isolated location of the site. In terms of the history of this, it's relevant. So in 2014, East Devon consented an anaerobic digestion plant at Enfield Farm, and then and that was ceasing its material and moving its digestate to approximately 8 farms in East Devon. And then in 2017, East Devon allowed a variation of that permission, which added a number of farms, so increasing the number of farms where the crops could be taken from and the digestate taken to, and it increased the range of farms up to about 20 farms, and included farms in Upton Pine. So in this area, not off this road. And at that time, there was considered not off this lane, but off the main area going up towards Upton Pine, that there would be an average about 3 vehicle movements per day to take those crops and digestate. The proposal, therefore, is to store materials and digestate from the Enfield Farm anaerobic digester, and it's for spreading on the applicant's farm. And this is particularly to be spread between October and March, because this is a nitrate vulnerable zone, so they can't have any nitrate spreading over those months. So the number of vehicles that they are proposing for those months would be about 4 vehicles movements per day. Originally, the application was proposing the use of HGVs to access this site. That was on the basis that the applicant felt that you would have less vehicle movements because you would be able to transfer more digestate at a time, and therefore that would reduce the number of vehicles. But as you can see from the report, there was concerns from ourselves, local residents, and Devon County as the Highway Authority, as these local roads weren't considered suitable for HGVs. So that HGV movements was taken out of the application. So all of the digestate would be moved by tractor and trailer. In terms of the principle of development, the idea is that the applicant will store the digestate on site for later use. So at the moment, they have to move tractors and trailers as and when they need it, or when the weather is correct. They have tractors and trailers moving between the farm and down to the AD plant, and that is done on an as needed basis. The idea is that by able to store in digestate on farm, that will make it more efficient. They'll be able to reduce the mass journey times when the weather's suitable, and therefore spread out the vehicle usage across many months, rather than it potentially being gathered in a few days or weeks. So as I say, the digestate will be on hand. There'll be more distribution of vehicle movements, and that's considered to be a reasonable justification in terms of allowing the principle of development. And in terms of spreading it on the farm, that will be a mixture of using cords and vehicles to spread the digestate on the farm, no different to if they were importing some sort of fertilizer that they needed to spread. So as justification, that's considered to comply with policy D7. But obviously you'll see in the report, there's a number of then issues to go through and potential impacts from the proposal. The first of which is highway impacts, which have taken considerable comment from local residents, as you will see. I've mentioned that the HGVs are removed, so all movements would be by tractor and trailer. And those tractor and trailer movements already occur, as the local residents are aware. The removal of the HGVs from the process could or has the potential to add an additional 100 and something two-way movements over that 5 months period, but that would equate to less than one vehicle movement per day extra. And as I say, the frequency and the times may change because the digestate is on hand, so there isn't this need to go and collect lots of that digestate all at one time for spreading. It can be spread out over those months. You'll see, however, in the report that we are recommending conditions to agree the routing of those vehicles, that the HGVs can't be used, and that it's the maximum tonnage or the maximum that are allowed is the 7,000, because that's what they've applied for, and that's what the maximum that the farm can take in terms of the AD plant consent. So these vehicles, and most of these vehicles are already existing. It is a rural farm. Tractors and trailers coming to and from rural farms are to be expected, and we've got no control over tractors and trailers on the highway in terms of movements between farms, going collecting other materials or fertilizer to be used on the land. There are benefits to the farm from it being storage on site and being on hand, and there are benefits potentially to the road in terms of spreading out those movements of collection of the digestate and when that occurs. And as I say, worst case scenario, it would be one extra vehicle movement per day. And we are restricting the amounts, the routes, the tractors, trailers by condition. And you'll see that Devon County have been heavily involved in this from a highways perspective, and subject to that are raising no concerns, aren't recommending refusal on highway safety grounds. With regard to residential amenity, there's no properties immediately near the site or adjoining it. So there's no impact from the operation directly. But the movements obviously to and from using this lane and going past local residents could have an impact, and they will obviously be aware of those movements. But as I say, the amounts will hardly be unchanged, the vehicle movements. There'll be no HGVs. And as I said, the worst case scenario would be one extra vehicle movement a day in that 5 months period. And there are benefit timings from, as I keep saying, from them having the materials stored on site. So it's not considered that there'll be a harm to residential amenity from those vehicle movements. And in a rural area, it has to be expected that there will be tractor and trailer movements. In terms of the visual impact, the proposal is modest in size. There's no wider harm. The landscape architect's been involved. There's planting of hedges to the proposal. There's a fence. You will view the site through the access, but lagoons like this are now common on farms, so it'll be hard to justify a refusal on its visual impact. So in conclusion, you'll see in the report, it's clear that the proposals generated considerable opposition, which is understood. There is an agricultural need and a benefit from the proposal. There's no harmful visual impact. There's no objection from county highways, and there'll be a benefit from the proposal from on-site storage in terms of spreading out that distribution and collection of the waste over a number of months, rather than it being contained in a shorter period as and when the weather or conditions dictate. And we are proposing conditions to restrict the amount, the routes, and to tractor and trailer movements. There will be some delays and impacts on the highway network, just as there are at the moment, but this proposal wouldn't make that any significantly worse to be able to justify a refusal on the basis of the lack of objection from Devon County and no significant increase in activities and those small benefits that I mentioned. So on balance, in light of all of that, the application is recommended for approval, as it's considered to be very difficult to justify a refusal on appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Right, now we call the objectors, Kenneth Ham and Sally Daldorf. Mr. Ham, would you like to begin, please?
Yes, good morning again, Chair, and thank you. I live on a sharp corner at the east end of Brixhamford Lane, where I am already seriously affected by the applicant's vehicles as they frequently encroach on my property. The site's location would greatly increase the passing traffic. I'm being professionally advised. I am troubled by the many important differences between the application documents and the OR. I will concentrate on the need justification required by your council's policies D1, D7, TC7, Strategy 7 and 623. For agricultural need, it has to serve a need on the farm. If it serves other purposes or stores imported digestate for distribution elsewhere, it should be refused. 3 main points. First, the application says the proposed storage lagoon is required to supplement the operations at the anaerobic digester plant at Enfield Farm, Cliff St Mary, and is in relation to it. This operation is clearly industrial. The AD confirmed in evidence to the November 2020 appeal decision that it lost that its digestate storage requirements are currently accommodated by the consented storage that it uses. The AD evidently does not need storage at Upton Pine. For some reason, the OR doesn't mention any of this. Second, the Upton Pine farm site is not a traditional working farm with its own machinery. The applicant serves it from his base east of Exeter, about 13 miles away, where he serves at least 5 other farms serving some 10,000 acres. The applicant's involvement at the AD currently enables him to spread digestate direct from the AD's storage to his fields when needed. This lagoon simply changes the collection point for digestate, but it also causes winter journeys to fill the lagoon in addition to the later spreading journeys. The additional travel is disregarded in the OR. The Upton Pine farm gains nothing. There is no agricultural need at the farm. Third, the application is about bringing 7,000 tonnes a year to Upton Pine, whereas the current permission in the applicant's name is for 4,280 tonnes a year. No justification for the additional 2,720 tonnes has been provided. The application includes vehicle numbers permitted to another business for another farm that partly shares the same route. That permission for 3,237 tonnes would continue. There must be at least
30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. There must be at least 340 extra two-way journeys to the farm, but for some reason the OR says this is not significant. Your officers include a proposed condition 8 allowing digestate to be distributed to 23 other farms that are not in the applicant's Upton Pine contract. Distribution away from the host farm conflicts with local plan, which I believe should make you decide to refuse the application. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Ham. Next, Sally Daldorf, please. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning. I live about 2 kilometres from the proposed site of the lagoon on Langford Road. It's lovely here. I and many of the 25 or so householders have lived here a long time. It's mostly single track, no pavements, with a couple of blind bends, only really leading to a few other hamlets, minimal traffic. The tranquility of the place is the main reason a caravan site and also a nursing home are here, providing visitors and residents a restful and countryside environment. Staff and visitors are often seen walking in the road from the A377 bus stop. These local businesses thrive due to their peaceful country setting. About 3 years ago, neighbours started noticing huge modern tractors piling up the road with laden tractors. We'd occasionally have a local farmer transport hay, but this was very different. Fleets of them thundering through the lane, especially loud when the trailers are empty, often going much quicker than the 30 miles per hour limit.
We seem to have lost you. Wendy, can you see what's going on there?
Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
We weren't able to hear you. Were unable to hear you for about 30 seconds.
All right. Where did I get to? My historic cottage?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So I'll go from that paragraph. About 3 years ago, neighbours started noticing huge modern tractors piling up the road with laden tractors. We'd occasionally have a local farmer transport hay, but this was very different. Fleets of them thundering through the lane, especially loud when the trailers are empty, often going much quicker than the 30 mile per hour limit. My historic Cobb cottage, like several others, is right on the road and literally shakes as these vehicles pass, probably causing untold damage. We discovered that traffic associated with the AD industry had been granted permission to pass through Langford to a site a mile or two beyond us. A neighbour followed a tanker to Showbrook and, speaking to the driver, discovered the connection with Mr. Parr. Combined with other recently established distribution depot, suddenly up to 50 vehicles a day would plague us. This must surely constitute a material condition in your decision regarding the lagoon application. The impact on local people's lives has been significant. They can start before 6 a.m, waking us, sometimes going on late into the evening, Saturdays and bank holidays. My son has been known to rush into our room at 4:30 a.m, terrified by the noise, having thought one of the vehicles had crashed into our house. Picture the scene when these vehicles meet. No passing point.
You've gone again, Sally Daldorf.
Mrs. Daldorf, can you hear me?
Oh.
Yep, you're back again, Mrs. Daldorf.
Oh, I'm back. Okay, right, I'll carry on. Did you hear the picture the scene when these vehicles meet?
We don't accept photos at the committee, Mrs. Daldorf.
Wendy, unfortunately, she seems to have left the meeting.
Okay.
Hi, no, I am here. Can you hear me again?
Yes.
I'm back. I'll go for maybe if I may. I'll go from the impact on local people's lives has been significant. They can start before 6 a.m, waking us, sometimes going on late into the evening, Saturdays and bank holidays. My son has been known to rush into our room at 4:30 a.m, terrified by the noise, having thought one of the vehicles had crashed into the house. Picture the scene when these vehicles meet. No passing points exist, so verges are destroyed and gridlock occurs. Fumes are pumped out as these vehicles try to negotiate each other. Residents, along with the parish council, have been in regular contact with DCC Highways, expressing concern over road damage, safety, noise and congestion. The routes vehicles would take resulting from this application are worryingly sketchy in the documentation presented, but it's certain that the officer's report cannot be correct in stating the vehicle movements associated with the development would not be detrimental to the occupiers and properties in the area. Okay. Locals and visitors alike flock to this area to cycle, horse ride and walk. Recognised cycle routes, bridle paths and footpaths abound. But with the current heavy traffic, we often avoid these healthy pursuits. It already feels too dangerous. If permission is granted for the hundreds of additional heavy loads associated with this application, along with those not addressed within it, the quality of life, well-being and fundamental essence of this place and its people will be lost forever. Councillors, the state of several hamlets and hundreds of Devon people is in your hands today. 500 of us have signed the petition. Please protect us from this heavy industry and reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Chris Rose, please. Chris, in response to the storage at Enfield, could you explain the point that Mr. Ham raised, please, that there was sufficient storage at Enfield and it doesn't need to be stored at this venue? Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So the Enfield Farm anaerobic digestion plant produces the digestate, and the planning permissions that have been granted on that site allow that digestate to go out to a number of farms and area, including to Upton Pine. So that's already consented, that's allowed, that wouldn't stop if this planning application is refused. I'm sure Mr. Stewart will talk through the benefits and the need to the farm from the proposal, but our understanding is that, digestate coming from the AD plant is more environmentally friendly than your traditional nitrate and other stuff that you spread on the fields. So therefore there is a benefit to the environment and to the farm from them taking the digestate rather than using other means. So that's the need that's put forward from the applicant, particularly given that they're in this nitrate zone where they can't spread nitrate from the October through to March. So that's the justification and the benefit put forward from the applicant, and I've no reason to disagree or to doubt that. Thank you.
Thank you. And another point, Mr. Rose, is about the hours of operation. Could that be conditions, please?
Yes, if you felt that was needed, then you could put an hours of operation condition on the application for you. Yes.
Thank you. Then we'll discuss that during the debate. Thank you. Now the applicant, the youthful Troy Stewart. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Chairman, and thank you for the compliment. I assure you I am getting older. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Yeah, we have been using this digestate on the farm for sort of 4 years now, and certainly have seen big improvements in the crops and the cropping because of it. Where we use it, it does completely replace any mineral fertilizers, so any bought-in fertilizers. We see better yields, we see better ground and healthier soils. It's basically used in a rotation around the farm. I do understand, obviously, neighbours' concerns about movements, and that is one of the main points of this application. You know, if this is refused, the digestate will still come to farm. What it actually does, it reduces the intensity, as Officer Rose has said, of the movements, because it means the digestate would already be at the farm. We won't have to have, we quite often have 10 or 12 tankers running a day, intensely running to and from the AD plant here when we're spreading. Whereas now, a lot of it could be spread with umbilical, but it'll say where it's close to the lagoon, it'll save movements again from the lagoon out to the farm. And where it can't be, it's only the tankers, it'll only be one, you know, a couple of tankers running locally while we're spreading. So it doesn't change the movements total, it just changes the intensity of the movement. So it would certainly answer one of the problems by one of your objections. It does provide a carbon saving, and it does provide basically an organic input. It's in a sealed bag. It's not an open lagoon. It's a sealed lagoon. So, you know, very low smells. I'm not that people have raised that as an issue. And also, as Officer Rose has said, you know, very low visual impact because it sits low. That's a good picture we can see there. The only place you would see it would be through the gateway. It actually sits a lot lower than the hedge. So it's not visual at all. And so I think it's been summed up very well by your officer, but but one thing on the conditions, if you are minded to approve, condition 3, as proposed, states a maximum weight of tractor and trailer 16 ton. Well, of course, that is impossible to comply. I think what we mean, or what should be meant on that, is a maximum carrying capacity of 16 tons. So a maximum load of 16 ton, not a maximum overall weight. The tractor and tanker empty is 16 tons, so that it'd be impossible to comply with that condition.
Oh dear.
And you mentioned hours of operation.
30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. No problem with an hours of operation condition for the movement of the material to the lagoon. If it would cause a problem if we had a restriction of actually when we can apply the digestate. Obviously, at the moment we can apply it whenever, and you know, farming, it's difficult. When you get your windows, you have to make use of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Mr. Stewart, could you hold on and maybe answer any questions from members of the committee after the other speakers, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. Thank you. Mid Devon District Councillor Graham Barnell, please. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm the District Councillor for the Mid Devon ward immediately next door to the proposed lagoon. And thank you for permitting me to speak today. I urge you to reject this application. This is part of an ever-expanding bioenergy industry based not only at Enfield Farm, but across Mid Devon. We are concerned, very concerned about the likely impacts on the community of Langford, through which much of the heavy traffic to and from the lagoon will pass. This application centres on road traffic and its impacts on communities in East and Mid Devon, but there is no travel or transport plan in the officer's report. No routes have been agreed with the applicant. No assessment has been or can be made of the impact of tractor or trailer on either the road network or on the communities through which the journey will take place. No evidence is produced to support the conclusion that the impacts on the local communities are reasonable, as the officer claims, or his assertion that the vehicle movements would not be detrimental to the occupiers of the property in the area. Because there's no evidence, these can be only considered to be conjecture on the part of the officer concerned. There is no evidence because there has been no assessments of the impacts on existing and lagoon traffic on the local communities or on the environment. There is nothing in either the officer's report or in the DCC Highways report that suggests any assessment of the impacts of lagoon traffic on the neighbourhood and on the people who live near it. And they're obviously the routes through it, Upton Pine in your district and Langford in mine. This is in clear contravention of several EDDC planning policies. That's S15, E4, E5, EN14. It's also in clear contravention of key MDDC planning policies that apply in this case. That's DM3 and DM4. No reference is made by planning officers of the relevance or applicability of either EDDC policies or MDCC policies. No mention is made by either EDDC or DCC officers of the impact of regular and persistent HGV traffic that already funnels through Langford and Upton Pine, for that matter, every day on its way to a grain and animal feeds distribution depot that has been set up in a neighbouring farm. This should have formed part of the assessment of the impact of the proposed lagoon, but in its important material consideration.
30 seconds remaining.
And no assessment of there's also been no assessment of on the people or communities who are replacing the HGV traffic with tractor and trailer as a preferred digestate transport. The impact has only been assessed in terms of its likely impact on the fabric of the roads. Tractor and trailer transport is just as wide and is longer than HGVs. As the number of tractor and trailer journeys will be far greater than the equivalent HGV journeys, it's reasonable to conclude the impacts on both communities of Upton Pine and Langford will be far greater than HGVs.
3 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Barnell. Councillor Bob Short, Upton Pine Parish Council, please. 3 minutes.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. I'm Bob Short, Chairman of the Parish Council at Upton Pine. We've been in the middle of all this for a number of years, and probably the only complaint, or biggest complaints we get from residents of the village is the number and size of farm vehicles passing through, which to some extent is well, we have to accept that farming practices change and that sizes of vehicles will get bigger, but the situation now is developing where we're going to be seeing transported waste, which is not from a farming enterprise basically. It's a byproduct of the industrial, I think it has to be classified as an industrial setup with the digester, and that I don't think fits the bill. Moving on to other areas, really, the passing or making of a decision on the actual storage facility itself. I just cannot see how we can arrive at a decision on whether it's acceptable when the conditions which are central to the application, which to our mind are the amount of traffic, travel, etc., that is going to be increasing and is going to be incurred, aren't known. There's a record of looking at the other parts of the business, being the digester at Ecclist, where there have been lots of conditions made and lots of them broken in the past. So how can we know that there's going to be no continuation of that with the the transport arrangements that are not even in front of us yet. Leading on from the actual digester, the lagoon itself, it seems to me that it's creating a storage facility for onward transmission from Upton Pine, where there isn't
30 seconds remaining.
Okay, sorry. Where there isn't a proven need anyway at the moment for the extra digestate to be spread on the fields around here. So again, there's nothing I can see in the conditions, in the application, which is saying that this isn't going to be the beginning of additional development of that site, and who knows where that will lead. But there we go. That's my bit.
Thank you, Councillor Short. Next, Councillor Roger Cashmore, Newton St Sires Parish Council, please. You had 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. I speak on behalf of the Parish Council at Newton St Sires and the residents of Langford. Please reject this application, which only benefits the expansion plant of the Enfield Farm AD, an industry located right the other side of Exeter. You've already heard evidence of how it has impacted the amenity and well-being of residents over the last 3 years. They are not only deeply angered by all this, but they also fail completely to grasp why this unsustainable application is even being considered, let alone the nearly 1 year it has taken to decide a minor application. Planning for AD plants is indeed complex, but long delays and lockdowns also provide time for us to conduct some deep research. We experienced difficulty in engaging with your planners, but later we were encouraged to find that independently, we all came to similar conclusions regarding permitted tonnage, number of trips, etc. Unfortunately, on reading your report, we were surprised to discover no one's figures tallied with those presented by your officer. So we set up the Exe Valley Residents Association in order to seek a legal opinion of a planning consultant. His analysis not only fully agreed with our own findings, but he has also raised further concerns of his own. And we have openly shared these findings with all the members of the committee. This submission confirms that it is solely based upon serving the industrial operations of Enfield Farm. The undeniable industrial nature of this application therefore clearly breaches your Strategy 7, Policies D7 and TC7, all regarding rural development. Unfortunately, your officer's report contains such little real supporting evidence that it has to be propped up by a total of 8 conditions. These are either conflicting or undefined, but all of them are practically unenforceable. The report even attempts to include tonnage and movements to locations that are not under the stewardship of the applicant, but of a Mr. Richard Parr. Further research uncovered examples of overproduction, disregard for conditions and PCNs, and again, no actual enforcement. And to be honest, this gives us very little confidence that any of these 8 proposed conditions are able to be either correctly defined or enforced. And that without a lot of more reliable information, we can only conclude that this is just another attempt to plan by stealth. Committee, we ask you to reject this application outright. But if you're still undecided, we'd
30
urge you
seconds
to
remaining.
defer your decision so that your planners are able to provide you and us, the public, with a much more balanced and reliable report. Finally, the officer's slide pack chooses not to share any pictures of the obstacles and tight bends needing negotiation just to get to Rixonford Lane. And this further suggests that this application could also benefit from a formal site visit, as well as a reliable data and an accurate, balanced report. Thank you very much indeed, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Cashmore. Right, and now we have the ward member, Councillor Fabian King. Fabian, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Please excuse my voice. I've never received such discontent, upset, or anger in Exe Valley as I have over this application. It is all to do with the nuisance, the level of nuisance. 5 or 6 vehicles per day was mentioned by the officer, whereas Troy Stewart mentioned 10 or 12 vehicles in use per day, say 5 round trips for each of them. That's 50 trips per day. And that is the sort of thing, it comes in surges. That's what we're complaining about. I tried to go along with the report and recommendations, but there are some contradictions and several conclusions that simply don't hold water. I'll just make 2 points to get to the heart of the matter. You've heard from previous speakers how the lagoon's capacity is much larger than can be used only at the farm. Indeed, the lagoon's size was formulated when the Enfield Farm biodigester was planning to treble its output. The planning inspectorate halted that expansion, but the lagoon's size was not then reduced. It is still large enough to play its part in the wider digestate industry. It poses as a distribution hub for many other farms is permitted by condition 8 of the officer's report before you, which depends on a different permission for Enfield Farm. This cross-referencing by condition 8 complicates the difficulties already stated in the planning inspector's dismissal of the appeal to Triple Enfield Farm's digestate output. In this dismissal, the inspector wrote, the overlapping permissions could create uncertainty, so on and so on. This could have implications for the effective administration and integrity of the planning commission. In my judgment, he wrote, this is a consideration that weighs heavily against granting permission. The current application and recommendations in condition 8 repeats this very same issue and raises again the problem outlined by the inspector, who wrote in his judgment, this is a consideration that weighs heavily against granting permission. This application contravenes policy D7 of our local plan. There is no genuine agricultural need. When the officer was asked to clarify about need at Enfield Farm, he quickly moved on to the organic benefits of the digestate. We didn't really get an answer. In the officer's recommendations, condition 3 restricts the lagoon to only receiving digestate from Enfield Farm, but all existing need is already provided for, as stated by previous speakers today. There is no new need at Enfield nor at Upton Pine, yet this application poses a huge increase in capacity. It is not explained, nor is it justified. And a huge increase in capacity needs a huge increase in traffic to fill it. And you must double that increase in traffic for onward distribution. Importantly, policy D7 states that permission for development will be granted when there's a genuine need and that it will not lead to an acceptable increase in traffic on the local highway. It does, therefore, I think it contravenes. There is so much opposition in Exe Valley to this application. The increase in nuisance from this traffic has been expressed well today. I have frequently been turned back from using some of our lanes by the sheer size of these tractors, trailers and tankers. You have to repeatedly give way and reverse great distance to give way to them. For days on end, using our lanes to get to some of our destination can be frustrated or denied. Worse, we are deterred from even trying some journeys when the convoys are running. is like Russian roulette because there is no schedule. I have to say that to say the traffic's going to be evenly distributed is piffle. It is an industry. They will organize the delivery of the digestate in batches according to their program evaluation review technique, project management at Enfield Farm. We will still get convoys. I urge you to reject this application because there is no need for a lagoon. Enfield is fully satisfied already. Upton Pyne is already satisfied. Enfield is not to expand. There is no new need. Traffic will not be eased, it will be increased. Strategies and policies are contravened. The report from the Planning Inspectorate provides compelling justification for reviewing the overlapping conditions which have been proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. I have a question for Mr. Rose, please. Mr. Rose, policy D7 has been referred to several times. Now, on point 5, it says it will not lead to an unacceptable increase in traffic on the local highway network. What weight does that carry against Devon County Council's Highways Authority statements that there is no harm with the as long as tractors and trailers are used? Could you say which of those is more significant, please?
No, well, yeah, sure. So to comply with policy D7, it needs to meet all of those criteria, that all of the criteria that are listed, all 5 of them, because I think number 3 is missing. So it shouldn't lead to an increase in unacceptable increase in traffic on the local highway network. You've heard, well, you can see in the report, Devon County's assessment of that. Our assessment is in the report, and you've heard that of the residents and the adjoining members and councillors. That's the decision now for you to make. But obviously, refusing something on highway safety grounds when we don't have the support of Devon County as the highway authority, it is always going to be very difficult, because you're then relying on us as officers to come up with that evidence. And as outlined in the report, the applicant's application states there'll be an additional, or potentially an additional 113 vehicle movements, and as I say, that's a lot less than 1 a day. Devon County have worked it out at 177, but that's because they're taking into account vehicle movements that are going elsewhere in Upton Pyne. And then you've heard from Mr. Ham, I think he mentioned a figure of 340. But again, that's less than 1 additional vehicle movement a day. So I understand the concern and the impact that the current activities are having on residents, but for us to be able to turn around to an inspector and justify that the extra vehicle movements are going to be harmful, are going to be difficult without Devon County's support, particularly when we're going to have an applicant talking to the planning inspector about the benefits of these fertilizers, as you've heard, the environmental benefits, and the benefits that they've outlined in terms of changing the vehicle spread, because they'll be able to store the material on site. So sorry, that's a long answer to your question. If you as members feel that there's a significant unacceptable increase in traffic, then you could refuse the proposal on that, but it's going to be difficult without Devon County's support.
Thank you for that clarification. Now, members, I see a number of hands up. Can you take your hands down, please, unless you have a question for the developer, please, for the applicant. Right, I see hands up. Councillor Skinner, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, to Mr. Stewart, I think the question I really want to ask is the amount of product and tonnage that is going to the site. I just want to be clear that all of that product in digestate is going to be used within the land of which you operate in that particular area. And the reason I asked the question, Mr. Stewart, is because there seems to be some rolling over here underlying that in actual fact, this may be used for storage for the benefit of just storage. And I just want to be clear that the product that's going there is all for the land that's under your, so I say, control or your ability to spread onto the land. Therefore, the amounts required to go to that site would equate to the amount of product that actually goes onto the crops that are there.
Thank you, Mr. Skinner, Councillor Skinner. Yeah, I understand the question, and actually was a point I wanted to raise from listening to some of the complainants. The farm, we farm approximately 700 acres in that area, all around that, the proposed lagoon. 7,000 cube will equate to roughly 250 to 300 acres a year of spreading of that farm. So it's not even enough to cover the whole farm each year. So the digestate store will only be used for the land that we control. It will not be used for onward or temporary storage to be onward to go elsewhere. It's not even enough to do the whole of that farm. So we certainly don't want it going anywhere else. And I think the whole point of this is actually it answers many objectors' problems in that the level of intensity of the transport. This application doesn't change the number of movements. It just changes when they will happen. And rather than having 10 or 12 a day, 10 or 12 tractors running intensely for a day, you'll have 1 or 2 running over a long period of time. So it spreads the movements out. That's the whole point of this, really.
Madam Chair, may I ask a secondary question? Is that?
Yes, yes.
And the whole point really around this, Mr. Stewart, was that where I wanted to get to was, and I suppose you've more or less answered that question, because at the moment, I take it that the problems that we're hearing from the residents, and I absolutely understand those issues. I mean, it's life-changing for them, the volume of traffic that's going there. But would it not be correct to say that at the moment you're taking product to this site on an as and when required basis, so therefore the volume of traffic needs to be delivered as and when you need to do it on certain days to get it covered? Would that be correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, that's how it works currently, yes.
So if I might follow with that one, then, so that means you don't actually have a facility at the moment to store the product. So in answer to your question and leading on to where you're going with this, you're actually building a storage lagoon to actually mitigate volumes of transport movements in a short period of time to actually put them over a longer period of time, so as the product is on site without you having to necessarily take it there on the day. And I take it, being a farmer myself, and I do happen to, as you well know, would know much about these things, on days that you can actually get the umbilical cords out and get spreading onto the land, if that's certainly the way that you do it, having the product there is really quite key and getting a lot of product on it in a short window of weather opportunity. Would that be correct?
100% correct. You've summed it up perfectly. That's exactly why, and exactly why we want to do this. It's not a store for Enfield, it's a store for the farm, to enable the farm to be able to spread efficiently and reduce the intensity of movements when we need it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. End of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor De Sarum.
Thank you. Good morning. Yes, my question to Troy is simply that I think Sally Zaldorf was concerned about the level of noise. You've answered when you talked to Councillor Skinner about how you're making these changes because it spreads out movement. I'm sorry if I've missed it in the conditions, but I think the loudness of the vehicles is also upsetting and impacting on residents. What thoughts are you going to do, Troy, to try and, if you are given this application, to try and make life better for the residents with the way they are looking at it because of the noise and possible nuisance? Thank you, Troy.
It's a very good question. It's obviously quite difficult. I think the noise element, probably the noisiest element of what we do is actually the silage trailers. If you know, the silage trailers, so nothing to do with the digestate, but when we're hauling the crop, as it were, away, the silage trailers, when they're empty, can rattle and bang over the ground. But we've done a lot in recent years on that. They all now run on air suspension, which is just like the lorries do. So they're a lot they're not on springs and are not on what would have been bogie suspension in the old days, which are used to get a lot more rattle and banging. So they travel a lot quieter. I mean, obviously modern tractors are quiet. The noisiest machine is the forager. You can't do a lot about that. It's the noise it makes, but it's only for 4, maybe 5 days a year at that farm. So it's intense for that period, but quite hard to do much more than run the best kit we can run, which is what we do. You know what I mean? It's hard to do much more than that. Come up with a better suggestion than what we do, really.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor King, board member, not a member of this committee, but you'd like to ask a question? Councillor King?
Yes, I beg your pardon. I have no question to ask. Perhaps I accidentally hit a raised hand or something.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ollie Davey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask Troy what you actually produce on the farm? Is it only biofuel for the AD plant, or do you produce other things as well?
Yeah, no, it's a very much a rotation on the farm. We are generally a third of the farm. No, sorry, 25% of the farm would be biofuels. So we're growing. The rotation on the farm currently is wheat, rape, and maize. So we would at any one time we'd probably have 50% of the farm in rough figures into wheat, which is for all grown for animal feed. 25%. This is broad figures. It obviously changed a bit into oilseed rape, which is for oil, and 25% for maize, which is for the biofuels.
Right. That answer your question? Okay, thank you. Right. Councillor Skinner, you have another question?
No, I don't, Madam Chair. Sorry, I always thought you were going to go into debate.
Well, I was until I saw your hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Right then, your name is first. Off you go.
Oh, carry on in this. Yes, I've read the report, and I do have a quite a substantial understanding of how this works and how farming has changed over the years, and it's changed in my lifetime. It's changed quite dramatically, and this is where we are. We have anaerobic digesters, we have digests, we have different ways of doing things. In my day, we used to spread lots of fertilizers that came out of bags, which was made predominantly out of oil and all the rest of it, and all these things. The whole world is changing and changing for the better. What I will say is that within those changes, of course, there's also impacts, and there's changes in farming styles and practices. And we used to have lots of little farms, and in my village, I think we had 9 when I moved there, nearly 40 years ago. I think dairy farms, I think we've got 2 now, and that's what happened. They've just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and the big farming scene is done on volume. It's done on acreage, and that's the way it's all done. And I'm afraid that's the way it works. So that's farming practices change, and obviously AD plants have come in as well, and it gives off this byproduct, which is used as a part of a fertilizer for farming for these processes. So just bearing all that in mind as to why these things are happening in the first place, and I'm of the opinion that I sort of sit here in very much of support is what's happening with the digest and the spreading of the product onto the land and all, because that bit I know and I understand. But I also understand that the traffic movements that people have put up with, and these tractors and trailers in my day, a little Ford 4000 with a 4.5-ton trailer, we used to bob around the lanes and you could pull over and you could get by in a car. The tractors that come today, you need about 4 or 5 steps to get up into the cab, and then we got an electronic seat, and then the thing bounces along on air suspension, and the 200 horsepower tractors, and when I hit about 50, and the whole thing has changed dynamically. And I'm not saying that's for good or bad or indifferent. It's just that's the way it is, and that's the world we live in. And because of the scale and the size of the tankers that are moving, I also understand that's where we are today, and we have to suck that up and deal with the way that we are. And what Mr. Stewart's doing is he's providing a farming practice which is not necessarily by his own design, but is one that is come through process and through involvement, and that's where we are. So the real balance here is understanding what seems to be the the congestion of traffic onto the roads, that when we look at the lane, and I'm looking at the picture in front of me, which is just a normal rural farming country lane, which I have where I live, all around my way, and I can imagine one of these John Deere tractors or whatever coming down with a great tanker on the back just about fills that road up. And if you're on a cycle, even on a push bike, let alone in a car, you nearly have to take to certainly the verges. If not, you've got to be careful not to fall into the ditch, I would assume, that was there in that hedge. And that's been pedantic about this particular photograph, of course. But for me, I have to balance up all things. And what I have to also say to myself in my own mind is that what I think the applicant is trying to do here, and I think the way I try to corner my questions or garner my questions, was to say, actually, are we trying to reduce large volumes of traffic in a short window and open those traffic movements out by having a lagoon into a much wider window? And I think that's where we as committee members need to understand where this application and why this application is coming for us today. As Mr. Stewart quite rightly pointed out, the amount of traffic movements is not going to change whether we accept this or we don't. So the amount of traffic movements are going to be the same. It's about how we deliver those traffic movements over a longer period of time. And in my opinion, and this is my opinion, and I'm going to, I shall probably lead on this one, is that I believe the benefits that are going to come from this, and I know from lagoons that have been built in other places as well, is that actually the impact is likely to be less in volumes of traffic in short periods of time over a longer period than it is by not having this lagoon and having large movements of traffic over a short period. So, Madam Chair, on that basis, in trying to understand where we are, I also understood from Mr. Stewart when we talked about I also wanted to talk about, all that's been concentrated on here is traffic movements, was the smell. And the smell is very much mitigated by having it all covered in is one thing. So that didn't seem to be an issue. And what I would like to do, I think, is to say to myself, as far as I'm concerned, and I know there's going to be much conjecture, and I want to hear whatever certainly my other colleagues have to say on the planning committee, but I'm going to propose that we support the offer of recommendation put forward by our officers. And what I will suggest to anybody else is, if they have a reason they want to oppose to this application, that Mr. Rose will certainly be looking for the reasons why we will not be supporting this application. On the highway grounds, the professional body that has been asked to comment on this particular application don't have any objection. And what they have done is come to an agreement to say, let's keep the HGVs, the big Arctics, off the road, and let's get it down to some smaller vehicles. I will move to one point, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, and that is what Mr. Stewart brought up, that is within our report, and it is within the report here that says on the recommendation 3, and I fully understand what he was saying here, is that the material, and if I may quote from the report for everybody to understand, material shall only be moved between Enfield Farm and the site to which this permission relates, using tractors and trailers with a maximum weight of 16 tons. I absolutely understand that. And the maximum weight of 16 tons with the tractors and trailers just won't cut it. So what I might ask is if they're perhaps through you, Madam Chair, and whether through the ward member or through certainly Mr. Rose, in delegating that weight band, because that weight band is not correct. It can't be correct because they can't run at that sort of weight volumes. The other question that was raised was talking about restrictions of timings on just being able to go to this site. Now, I think what I would like to suggest, and I would like to hear from other members, is that for the benefit of the residents in that particular area, I think a time of when they start in the morning, and there was a young lady was speaking about tractors rumbling along at 6 o'clock in the morning, if not before, which means they must be starting from Enfield, 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever. That, I think, would be only reasonable for us to suggest that they don't quite start so early in the morning, and they perhaps even it would be better if we went a little bit more with normal hours. And I think that's something, because I don't fully understand what the implications of this would be with the applicant. I would like to think there was a discussion around some sort of condition around timings. And I might even like to suggest that perhaps there was talk here that was Sundays and bank holidays. And I would think that perhaps could we not have Sundays and bank holidays, that these people can actually live their lives on certain days of the week, and it may be even weekends. I don't know what that is because I don't know the implications, what that would be to the applicant. But what I would like to do with a condition of the times of operation are certainly looked at and discussed and brought forward in what I would call in a reasonable, what would be reasonable manners for these people to live their lives. And I think that would only be reasonable under the circumstances of where we are. I hope I conclude on what I'm saying. I hope that members feel that I've left enough for discussion and debate about how we're going forward. But I am making the recommendation of moving the officer's recommendation of approval in this particular case, and would very much look for a seconder. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Wright, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I did have my hand up because I wanted to make some points, and I totally understand and sympathise with the concerns that have been expressed by, certainly by Sally. And I think we're in a situation here where agriculture is changing. Vehicles are much bigger. Only yesterday, I think, I was held up in traffic trying to go through Colleton Raleigh on a B road because one of these new massive agricultural vehicles was coming towards me. And I think all of us who live in this area will experience that. But that is in a drive to make farms more efficient, to produce food more efficiently and therefore more cheaply, so that we can all enjoy good quality food at a price we can afford. And in fact, the whole principle between this anaerobic digestion is actually providing more in the way of organic feed for our agriculture. What I did pick up during the very reasonable presentations made by all the objectors was that the objectors seem to be based very much on what the situation is now, that there is now considerable disruption caused by these massive vehicles bouncing along. In my experience, I've actually seen some combinations of tractors and trailers which are far bigger than most heavy goods vehicles or large goods vehicles, which is the current expression. The evidence from Mr. Rose and from the Highways Authority is that although there is currently undoubtedly very disruptive traffic for those who live in the area, the actual volumes and movements of that traffic is not going to significantly increase. And we're all aware of the increased traffic down in this area. I actually could see some great benefit to the residents in actually imposing some sort of time restriction, as we do in more urban areas, on the time that lorries can deliver to our supermarkets and stores. We do impose those which are imposed. And I also see some benefit in perhaps reducing or limiting movements at things like weekends and bank holidays, when of course our roads down here are overly congested by other movements, such as ever bigger caravans and camper vans on the roads. So I second Councillor Skinner's proposal to support on the grounds that the evidence is that however disruptive movements are, and I totally sympathise with those people affected by them, the actual implications of this application are not to significantly increase those movements. So I think on the basis of what the officer says in the report, we have very few grounds on which we can object to this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. And I know that you were trying to get my attention earlier, but I wanted the objectors and the applicant to speak first before. Do you?
All I was doing on that, Madam Chair, was trying to ask a question of Mr. Rose on the size of the tractors and trailers which would be allowed.
Yeah,
but in fact,
yeah. Okay.
I'd actually lit my clapping hand, not my attention hand. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, there is quite a lot of concern and I think and sympathy for the objectors and for the ward member on the disruption to to their lives. Could I go to Mr. Rose, please, and pick up on Councillor Skinner's comment about the weight of the machinery, the vehicles, and also a reasonable condition for working hours, times? Mr. Rose?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I do take the point from the applicant and Councillor Skinner that we need to come up with a slightly different wording for condition 3, because the way it's worded, it could be construed to mean the weight of the vehicle is included rather than just the weight of what it carries. So I'm happy to, I think as Councillor Skinner suggested, maybe that we agree that if you were to approve permission, we agree that revised wording with you as the chair and the ward member, to make sure it reflects what county highways are expecting in terms of the traffic numbers, and we get the wording correct, because there are highways terminologies for weights which I'm not I'm not fully up to speed with, so I'd want to check that with them. And in terms of hours, yes, I was looking in the applicant's submission. There's nothing in there at hours. I certainly can understand if members feel that anything before 7 a.m. in the morning would be too early, and maybe to 7 p.m, something like that in the evening. Again, happy to run that past you and the ward member. And yes, as I was saying, I was looking in their submission a minute ago, and they only talk about movements on a Monday to Saturday. So again, if you wanted to restrict Sundays and bank holidays, I think that would be reasonable as well. Thank you.
Okay, and that's acceptable to the proposer and seconder?
Yes, certainly. Sorry, you go first, Phil.
I think absolutely. I think I would sooner, if we could have, for the benefit of the residents, if we could have run this on a Monday to Friday basis. I get that I didn't suggest Saturdays actually, but I was meaning Sundays and Peace Day, Church Day, if you like, and bank holiday weekends. But if that was going to include Saturdays as well, the only thing I don't quite understand would be why I think there's a discussion with yourself, Madam Chair, and the ward member with Mr. Rose, and perhaps to understand from the applicant is what the impact of what that is, because I don't want to put in a condition that means it affects it in some other way, which doesn't achieve what it is, some of the things we didn't want to achieve. So we need to understand some of that. The weight thing, I absolutely get that. I think that's just a typo there, but by that. So there's that part to put in. But if you could do that, I think that would be very acceptable, and I would find that very acceptable in that agreement in coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Wright.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think there is some confusion. I know that sometimes people employed in agricultural industry have to take advantage of weather conditions for things like harvesting. So very often at nights, all hours, we have these containers with the harvest in them. That is not the case here. The case here is moving stuff from a plant to a storage lagoon. So I think under those circumstances, it will not be at all unreasonable to be quite severe in the time conditions that this council asks for.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, so I have one, Madam Chair, I have one point I wanted to ask. And because Mr. Stewart did say earlier within the conditions of putting in that he would work with the conditions, what he couldn't do, and I don't think it's reasonable for us to do, and it's something I'm not proposing to put forward, is when it comes to the spreading of the product onto the land. Being a farmer, I know the window of opportunity is quite small. I'm not talking about having any time restrictions on the spreading of the product from the lagoon onto the land. Now that's probably done with the umbilical cord, and it won't probably go onto the roads. But I just want to be clear of that, because I don't want that coming into confusing.
No, it's just the traffic movements that you were referring to. Thank you. Okay, I think Councillor Key is next.
I nearly went to sleep through that. Right. No, I mean, the thing is, as we can appreciate, this is doing a service, because the digester is doing a service for the community and for the country. This is doing a service to actually discharge what is being emitted there. I can appreciate the fact that the time limits on it. I was going to actually suggest that it would have been 8 until 7, but so that it gives people, and I mean, especially the elderly people, when they don't get up that early, to actually, you know, sort of live a reasonable sort of life. With that amount of land, actually, Mr. Stewart could actually start up a 600 or 700 dairy herd there with buildings and such, but he would want a bigger lagoon than what he's actually having there now, right? So, I mean, I cannot see too much of a problem of this. I know that Mid Devon went on it, but I mean, Mid Devon's the other side of the road. So if it was in their patch, then we wouldn't be looking at it only as the adjoining council. But I cannot see the problem with this. I mean, what I would say is I mean, we know that the tractors and the tankers are a lot bigger now. If there was articulated lorries going there, we would be looking at probably 32, 40 ton. But I mean, I think probably what we're looking at is something in the region of between about 25 and 30 ton going through there, which would be acceptable. I feel sorry for the people that live there, yes, but we have to move on, I'm afraid, in life. And this is part and parcel of farming. We can put a restriction on when the stuff is delivered there. We cannot put a restriction on any of the crops that are sent from that farm, because they have to be done when they are at reaping point, and therefore and I mean, you can't restrict their time either, because I mean, they have a short window to do that, and therefore would have to go from, I mean, where I live, I mean, out in the country, I mean, I get silage tractors going past me with lights on 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, you know, you've got to accept it, because it's not going to, you know, it's not going to be for that long. It's only going to be for probably 3 or 4 days. So, I mean, I really support this, because I do feel, I appreciate what all the objectors are saying, but at the end of the day, right, we have to look forward into all of these things. And this is one way of actually reducing the fertilizer, which Mr. Stewart said on there, which can soon contaminate water supplies and such like and rivers, whereas this is organic and is doing a good job, as he said, improving the crops. And so, yes, I fully support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Councillor Whibley.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, first of all, I kind of feel there is still some debate as to how environmentally friendly maize used for biofuel is, but obviously that's not for here. The one thing that I'm a little bit confused about, I say I'm confused. Everybody seems to be saying a different thing in terms of whether or not there'll be more, less, or the same number of vehicles. It appears to be at different times of the day, there'll be more, there'll be less. And at various points in various reports, and then at various points in representations, people have said there'll be 1 more a day. Then I've heard there'll be 50 more. And, you know, again, it's very difficult to sort of make a judgment, even if, as the officer said, Devon County hasn't objected on those grounds. And I think it's disappointing that the DCC report doesn't acknowledge that there's already an impact on people's lives. And I understand that agriculture is changing, and that, as I can't remember who it was, I think it might have been Councillor Skinner, that a drive towards efficiency, you know, is meaning the vehicles get bigger. But that'll only work if the infrastructure allows it. And this picture that's been on here all of the time, I imagine 16-ton vehicles driving up and down there. And, you know, I don't know. As the officer says, it appears there would be little grounds if it went to appeal. But to me, it doesn't feel right, and I completely understand why the local councils and the residents who are impacted by this feel so strongly about it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The point that Councillor Whibley has raised, could I ask Mr. Rose if he can give any more clarification to the numbers of traffic movements, vehicle movements, please?
Yes, sure, because I understand there's even I think have mentioned 3 different numbers. So the applicant's position is that there's been no increase in vehicles, so they're already taken this amount of digestate from the anaerobic digester to the farm, and that's not going to change. What's going to change from their point of view is the timing that they do it and the frequency. So as Mr. Stewart said, instead of it being all done over a confined period of time when it's needed, this will allow more regular trips to the lagoon. Now, the figure of 113 additional trips comes from the applicant's transport statement, and that's on the basis at the moment the vehicles from the AD plant to the site can include some HGV movements. So if all those HGV movements were removed from the transport figures, you get 113 extra movements along to this farm. And the reason that I was careful in the presentation to say potentially 113 extra is because they could already move all that digestate from Enfield Farm to this farm using tractors and trailers. So that's why the applicant is saying no increase. Highways Authority have come up with an increase of 177 because they've taken the applicant's transport statement that says 113 additional on the basis there's no HGV movements, and also added in vehicle movements that are not going to this farm but also happening in the area. So they've looked at not just this lane but the wider highway network.
Right.
And then there's other figures from the applicants and Mr. Ham, which I don't fully understand the mass behind it, but I think Mr. Ham mentioned 340 extra movements, and my point there simply was, well, that's one. It's spread over a year. That's one extra movement a day, which even given the level of movements at the moment, is fairly insignificant and wouldn't be the sort of unacceptable increase that policy D7 is looking at. So I understand it's all quite confusing because there's various transport consultant reports in, but I think the bottom line, as the applicant said, is they're already taking this amount to the farm. They're just going to take it to the farm over different timescales, and this will allow them to store it there.
Thank you for that, Chris. Thank you. Right. As you've heard consistently throughout this application, there are insufficient highway grounds for objecting, and therefore it would stand very little chance, if any, should it be refused and go to appeal. But we debate further. Councillor De Sarum, please.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Chair. I think what brought this to the committee was, of course, the issue of the level of nuisance. And I think that what we've heard is clearly the applicant is looking to mitigate this, as Mr. Rose said. And for me, I've noted the 3 benefits which we spoke about earlier as to why we should proceed with this, is that there will be a carbon saving. They come in sealed bags, which reduces the smells, and there's a very low visual impact to the site. So those are the three benefits which I think are why we should go with this today. So for those reasons, in my own mind, I'm willing to support approval. So that's what I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Where do we start? I suppose I've got to start by saying, as Enfield Farmers in my ward, I'm disappointed it's not HGVs, because what was made quite clear in the appeal inspector's report on Enfield Farm was that the less vehicles, the better for my residents in my ward. And obviously, if I can get 1 HGV instead of 2 tractor trailers, which are noisier on the road, my residents would win. But nevertheless, we're not in that place. We are in a different place. I have a couple of concerns, and I think we've been over numbers a few times, but I need to come back to condition 8 as a starting point. And I'm not against this application for all the reasons said. This doesn't change the quota of movements or anything else, or the quantity of movements, but I do think there are grey areas we need to be clear about, especially relating to all the problems we've experienced with Enfield Farm, particularly in my ward. And the first one is, as I say, on condition 8, it says the material stored at the development hereby approved may only be spread on the land which the material transported from Enfield Farm under planning permission is permitted to spread. That I don't believe is clear enough. I believe it needs to be for the farm concerned, because we've had cases in the past where product from Enfield Farm has gone as far as Exmouth to be stored and then onward distributed to other locations. So I'm quite happy with what Mr. Stewart said. I understand it said he hasn't got enough in this lagoon for his own farm, but I think we need to back that up and say that this lagoon is for servicing his own farm, that farm, and no further enterprises or farms further around. So I would ask the proposer and seconder to consider that. Where else do I go? I need a bit of clarification from Mr. Rose, I suppose, is the second question, because it's been mentioned of 7,000 tonnes, but then someone mentioned somewhere along the line that only 3.5 were permitted to this site on the application. There are many applications that exist on Enfield Farm. I just want clarity that Enfield Farm planning permission allows 7,000 tonnes of material to go to this farm on its own. And I would be very much appreciate that we are not, as Councillor King said, cross-matching different applications for different reasons. So I just need to be clear that the current allowance at Enfield Farm allows 7,000 tonnes, not 3.5 as has been proposed or suggested. Mr. Rose.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, so there'll be no, this consent wouldn't allow any additional to go to this farm over and above what is allowed from that original AD plant consent. What it would do in effect, or what has been happening in effect, is that there's been, that there's an amount in the original AD plant that can go to this part of the district. I think that was originally proposed to be split between a number of farms, whereas the majority is going to this farm. So I think that's where those other figures come from. But the bottom line is this consent wouldn't allow this farm to take any more than it can in accordance with that AD plant consent.
Thank you, Chris. Now, there was quite a lot of feedback, even though my microphone was on mute when Councillor Howe was speaking. So it was difficult to follow that. Can members make sure that their microphones are on mute when they're not speaking, please? Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. I looked in our local plan last night to see if there's a definition of agriculture. I couldn't find one, because it seems to me that 25% of this farm is an industrial operation. It's been suggested that the anaerobic digester performs some kind of service. It produces power and it produces fertilizer, and that certainly is a service, but it's not in any way sustainable or green when it requires so much transportation. Now, normally we ask for quite a high level of proof in order to comply with policy D7. And I seem to remember an application recently that was recommended for refusal because it was felt that the need for the buildings in question had not been proved. But here, the applicant has simply said, well, it'll enable me to spread out the vehicle movements, and we've gone, well, that's all right then, that complies with D7. But I ask myself, what farm needs 500 HGV loads of fertilizer a year. That's an awful lot of material going on the land. It must be extremely productive, but it does seem an extraordinary amount. I think we heard somewhere, and like Joe, I'm a bit confused about exactly how many vehicle movements there are, but at some point I've written down 4 vehicles per day, and that's without normal farm operations. So I'm slightly puzzled also by the county highways approach. They must have a very narrow view of the county highway network if they think that 500 HGV movements is not okay, but 875 tractor and trailer movements is okay. And I feel as though, yes, they may be looking at the impact on the actual road surface, but they're not thinking about the amenity or the convenience of the people who actually live around there. And we're still looking at the picture of the road on the screen. That does not look like a suitable road to be taking several vehicle movements a day of any weight. And it's been suggested that the lagoon will make this situation better, but really it's just saying an intolerable situation is going to be made marginally better by the creation of this lagoon. The route itself from Enfield Farm to this, which is some considerable distance, I think I've heard 13 miles quoted, is subject to condition. So I wonder how county highways can judge the effect on the roads when they don't know which roads are going to be used. And I just feel we need to respect the views of so many local residents. And I don't see that the convenience of this farming operation outweighs the inconvenience to those people. I've lived in the country, and I accept tractor movements at certain times of year, like another councillor who spoke. I have expected that at harvest time or silage time or whatever, you're going to get a burst of traffic and trailer movements, but it's going to stop or it's going to slow down after a bit. This is not. This is just going to be regular deliveries of large amounts of material on an ongoing basis, day after day. If we are minded to approve this, then absolutely we should condition the hours of operation for the delivery of this material. But I really cannot support this as it stands at the moment, given the level of local opposition that we have heard from local people and from their representatives.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Gazzard.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, I've found, like several other of my colleagues, the figures are very varied, and I'm still trying to get my head around the figures. But a lot of the points that I was going to raise, Councillor Davey has raised, so I would concur with what Councillor Davey has said. And I do think that we seem to be ignoring the concerns of the residents who have quite clearly suffering with this amount of traffic that's on the road. And that, you know, as has been said, we've had this picture on our screen for I don't know how long, ever since the debate has started. And I just think it's you know, having all that extra traffic, which in my mind, it's going to be extra traffic going down there. It is going to cause huge amount of damage to that road. And I'm really disappointed that for whatever reason, Devon County Council don't seem to be able to understand that there is going to be an increase in traffic along there. So I'm still undecided on this at the moment, Chair. Thank you.
Chair, you're muted at the moment.
Do apologise. I am going to support this application, but I welcome the comments made by Councillor Skinner and Councillor Wright when they mentioned the fact that the applicant should consider a timescale on when the work is being done, or the operation is being done. The residents have to be considered here, and I don't know whether council. Sorry, I'm not sure whether Mr. Stewart is present. Whether he would want to make any comments on a time scale, but this is something which I think needs to be dealt with to make the position better for the residents in the area. So I'm not happy about the situation, but I will nevertheless approve.
Thank you, Councillor Pratt. It has already been agreed between the proposer and the seconder that there should be time limits. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Key, then Councillor Wright, and then we'll go to the vote.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I mean, it was mentioned just now with regard to fertiliser and what is being delivered in this lagoon. Now, I mean, as we all know, or hopefully we all know, that, I mean, there is a difference between fertiliser and organic manure. Organic manure, which is being delivered to this lagoon, actually feeds the crops, feeds the land, whereas your fertiliser is a forcer and is spread to actually make things grow a hell of a lot quicker. Just to put that to clarification. Just to finish on a bit of a light note, I've had this picture in front of me now for an hour and a half, and I haven't seen one vehicle on it yet.
Do you know the same thought? Councillor King, right. Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just, I noted what the speakers have said who are not in favour of this application, and we're looking at this empty road. But as I explained when I expressed my sincere sympathy for those who live there, there are already great tractors and trailers lumbering across this road. So let's not try and rewrite history and go back before this plant was ever there. It is happening now, and the evidence is that there might be 2 or 3 more vehicle movements per day. So we are faced with a situation which is a very unfortunate situation, but I don't think this application will materially affect it. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, there's one more speaker, Councillor Skinner, as he proposed.
And just to sum up, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, Councillor Howe did ask a question, and the question he sort of aimed a little bit over in my direction, I think, was about all of the digestate being used to this farm. It was actually confirmed by Mr. Stewart. I did ask him that particular question, and he did actually clarify that actually all the digestate. In fact, he went on to say, actually, I haven't had enough digestate, and probably that's because the window of opportunity of spreading it, he probably got a window that was open. He tries to get all his digestate there, then the rain comes in and it stops, and he's probably got to stop before he's actually finished. And I say that being from a farmer and actually understanding where that is as to why that is there. And the only last point I'll pick up on, and I say this particularly to Councillor Davey, is that we within this council, and I understand within this council, are very much, and Councillor Davey being a part of the Green Party, is driving towards this new sort of no oil and this energy and all the rest of it, and this environmental way of going forward. What is going to come with this environmental way of going forward is there is going to be consequences to those effects. And those effects are going to be things like this happening, solar panels, wind farms, all of these things that are going to impact on our environment. And when I ask members to do it, and I'm pleased, Councillor Davies is absolutely entitled to his opinion, and I fully respect what he has to say. And we do want a diverse of opinion. Of course we do. And I think it's only good and only to be encouraged. But I also want to try to understand for members that when things come forward to this planning committee, that is going to be the new green energy, the new, whether we agree with the subsidies they're put in or not is another debate altogether. And Councillor Whibley sort of touched a little bit on that. And I sort of actually agree with some of the things where that debate would be, not for now, but at another time. But we really must understand what the impact on the countryside is going to be with us turning into this green energy, because we're not going to live our lives as we've always done in the past. And this is part of that agenda. I'll leave it to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Howe, last speaker.
Yeah, thank you. I need to come back to Councillor Skinner. And hang on a second, I'll try something else again. I need to come back. Any better? Any better? Yeah. I need to come back to the point you made, and it was the point I was picking up, and I would like a change in condition 8 to reflect that, because at present condition 8 just specifies all the farms that Enfield Farm planning application allows it to be spread on, to be taken from this new lagoon. I believe we need to change that wording to say this farm concerned, and the applicant has confirmed he hasn't got enough in this lagoon for his own farm, so why would we allow it to be spread further wide and etc. So I would request that that is changed to specify this farm only for that digestate. That I think is only fair and reasonable, being as what we've been told today. So I request that, please, if you could consider it.
Madam Chair,
Do you accept that?
I'm quite happy to. I'm not fully understanding the implications, and I need to understand what they are. But what I do understand, if I may put it clear to Councillor Howe, what you're saying is everything that goes from the Enfield AD plant through this operation of transport to this site here in this application here today is used only and solely for that application. Is that clear? Right. And on that basis, Madam Chair, I would concur with that. I'm quite happy to work with that, because that's what this application is all about, and so it should be. Yes. If I don't know, Councillor Wright, what his view is, if he supports that as well.
No, come on. We'll. Oh yes, Councillor Wright, you seconded. So.
Totally agree with that, Madam Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Can we go to Mrs. Shaw now, please, to sum up?
Thank you, members. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. I had problems earlier on in the meeting. Members, you have a motion before you to approve the application subject to conditions as listed, with delegation to the chair and ward member of condition 3 in relation to the maximum size of vehicles and trailers and product. The later condition 8 amendment in relation to where the digestate, the product, can be used, and another condition in relation to the timing of deliveries to the site. Members, when your name is called, please would you indicate whether you're in support of the motion to approve, against the motion to approve, or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I need to be clear on what Mrs. Shaw has said. What she said was that in point 3 of the recommendation regarding the size of the vehicles, and what we were talking about was the weight of the vehicles going up to what I believe is in this report of a maximum of 31 tonnes. And I want to be clear that that's what people understand. We're talking about the weight, and that will actually concur with being the size of the vehicle as well. I get what she means, but I need to get that, needs to be really quite clear. And the reason I say that is because there is a figure in here of 16 tons. That will have to be adjusted. So if we accept the fact that there's going to be the weight, and we're talking within here, within legislation, I believe I'm right in saying, if I'm stand to be corrected, is a maximum of 31 ton on agricultural vehicles. But if that is where it's going to be, that's going to be done with the chair and the ward member with the applicant and Mr. Rose, which was my understanding. Thank you.
Chair, apologies.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Skinner. I did have a note. It was condition 3, delegate to the chair ward member for Mr. Rose to reword the maximum weight of the vehicles. I do apologise.
Thank you. Thank you. Right then, do we
Will I
move
start
to
the vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. So, Councillor Chamberlain.
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Against.
Against. Thank you. Councillor Desarum.
In support of motion to approve.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Support. Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Whibley.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Ragg.
Approve.
Support approval. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Ragg. Sorry, it was Councillor Ragg.
Thank you.
Approve, was that?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. And Councillor Wright.
Yeah, approve.
Thank you. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in support of approval. 1, 2, 3 against. I can confirm the vote to approve has been carried.
Thank you, Wendy. Right, now we move to agenda item 8, application 202542, full, it's a minor application, Straight Gate Farm, Exeter Road, Ottery St Mary, and it's on page 25. 2 members have just left for a drink. Can we wait until they're back, please?
Certainly, we'll just put a slide up.
Okay.
How long do you think they'll be?
Well, they're only getting some water.
Okay. Maybe we'll just hang on.
Oh, there's another one on the way out now. Oh, can we have a break for a couple of minutes then, please?
Yes, certainly. Could all members turn their microphones off, please, and their cameras, and we'll go for a short break. Councillor Ragg, when will we be returning?
Well, it's not even 12 o'clock yet, so I suggest just 5 minutes.
Okay, lovely.
This is not Friday. Okay, so that took 2 hours. 2 hours on this one. Riley? 2 hours on the next one? Sorry? I said 2 hours on the next one. Oh. That's how many items you put forward. You're in your hand. You're in your hand.
Not all of the microphones are muted, and what's being discussed is going out live across the feed at the moment. So can we check all councillors have muted their microphones, please?
Oh, it was very mustful, David. Yes, I'm still looking for it now. you had me going there for a minute.
Members, please could you keep your voices down? Unfortunately, one of your committee hasn't muted their microphone and we can hear you.
Just leave out there, to be honest. No, I'm shocked. I mean, did you see anything going on that road? No. The fact is, the traffic was already going on. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's all written on the table.
Can someone turn off Jeff Pratt's microphone, please?
We're all back now, Wendy.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, so here we go again. Agenda item 8, application 20-2542, full. It's a minor application for Straight Gate Farm, Exeter Road, Ottery St Mary, on page 25. I'd like to welcome to the meeting Monica Mortimer, Clive Tompkins and Councillor Roger Giles. You don't look a day older either, Roger. Oh, don't. Right. Over to Chris Rose, please. Present your report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application for a new access onto the B3174 Exeter Road to the main road between Ottery and Daisy Mount roundabout to provide a livestock crossing for the farm. It's before you because there's a ward member objection. So you can see here the location of the crossing. The two red squares either side of the crossing are holding pens for the animals. And if I just go through, you can see the wider. So we've got the A30 down here, so you can see where we are on the straight bit of road there. So at the moment, there's the field, there's a Devon bank, a ditch, and then the road. So you can see that they're going to come across the field, through the bank, culvert the ditch, and then join up with the road, and then come through a gap in the hedge, so that the cattle can come straight across the road there. And there are the details of that with the holding pen. And these are various views from the junction looking back down the road, so you can keep members be aware of the straightness of the road, but there are some rises in the road there. And this is so at the moment you've got the access that comes out here, and then they have to, the cattle are staggered, so they come out of one access, come up the road, and then come in. And the idea here is to get an access that goes straight across the road, so to move this kink to speed up the crossing of the vehicles. And that's the gap that they're proposed to come through. So there's a gap here in the trees where the telegraph pole comes through. So that's where the new crossing is proposed. And these are photos further up showing that there is a brow of the hill along the road there. So there's a 45, as I mentioned, there's a 45-meter stagger at the moment between the crossings. So the proposal here is to make is to straighten those crossings. There's also, as a result of Highways involvement, there will be warning signs and flashing lights put on the road for when the crossings are needed. You'll see in the report there's reference to the Devon Minerals Plan. So this area is in the Devon Minerals and Waste Plan for sand and gravel extraction. And at the moment there's an application for that with Devon County Council for them to determine. The concerns resolved of this application are whether this relates to that application in terms of if that sand and gravel extraction application goes ahead, then there's a chance that there will be more livestock crossings on this road. So people are concerned about allowing this crossing and its relationship to that minerals and waste application. But as you'll see from the report, we have to consider this application on its own merits. It is for a crossing only. If Devon County were to allow the application in front of them, and if that were to generate more crossings of this road, they would have to mitigate that as part of that Devon County application. And there has been some mention from some objectors of the possibility of that needing a tunnel under the road. But that's not for consideration for you today. That would be for Devon County to determine if that minerals and waste application is going to have that impact, and if it does, what mitigation is required. So in this case, we've got an application, as I say, for a crossing. And you'll see in the report the various uses the timing for that crossing. So between Easter and Christmas, 1 week per year, spring and autumn, once a month, in the summer, once a week, and another couple per year, depending on the weather. And this proposal won't increase those crossing numbers. It's purely to stop this stagger in the road, which means that the animals will be able to cross the road quicker. You'll see in the report that there was a road safety audit done at the request of Devon County. And this road safety audit has resulted in the request for these lights and signs to be installed on the road. You saw the photos, very straight road. There are some crests in the road, so it was felt that it would be a benefit off the back of this application, because there are no lights and crossings at the moment, if they were provided as part of this application. And subject to that, there's no objection from Devon County from a highway perspective on the basis that there's no greater number of crossings proposed. This scheme isn't related to the minerals and waste application. There is an obvious benefit of having a straight crossing to the road and the livestock pens, because it will delay the amount of time people are queuing in their cars waiting for the cattle to cross. And I think that addresses some of the concerns from the residents. The signage is considered to be suitable, even though there are some crests in the road there at the moment, because, as I say, there's already a crossing there. And you'll also note there's no objection from Highways England. So On the basis there's no increase in the crossing numbers, it will be a speedier crossing. There's improved signage. There'll be the lighting warning signs. It will be an improvement on the current situation, and therefore there's no highway safety objection. There's no visual impact concerns. As I showed, there was a small gap in the trees there at the moment where this access can be provided. There's no harm, wider harm to trees, and no wider visual harm from this little crossing for the cattle. So in conclusion, this application is not related to the wider Devon County application. It will be for Devon County to determine, if they approve the application, if there's any further works needed to the crossing in this case, a tunnel, for example. But that's not for consideration here. We need to consider the application in isolation. And in simple terms, it's providing an improvement to the road. As I mentioned, the speed of the crossings will be improved. There'll be lights and signage put in the road, no greater crossing numbers. And you'll see in the report that we've conditioned all of that to ensure that it will be an improvement on the current situation. So in light of that, the application is recommended for approval with conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think I should declare a personal interest in that I was a member of the working group that helped draw up the Devon Waste and Minerals Plan. Thank you. Right, now we have welcome to the meeting, Monica Mortimer, Clive Tompkins, Roger Giles, Councillor Peter Faithful, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Johns, and Councillor Pratt as the ward member. So we start with Monica Mortimer. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. You'll have seen that this proposal has generated many objections. This cattle crossing is being sought by Aggregate Industries, a quarry company. It is not being sought by the farmer, who rarely moves livestock over the Exeter Road. On the few occasions they have, it's been done safely. So why is a new crossing needed? Aggregate Industries, in the supporting statement, says the crossing is for the farm's dairy herd. This herd consists of around 150 cows. However, the whole dairy herd rarely, if ever, needs to cross. No farmer would want to put such a large number of animals across such a fast road. Aggregate Industries, on the other hand, needs a crossing for the dairy herd to facilitate their future plans for Straightgate Farm. Plans which would remove nearly 90% of the fields, meaning the herd would need to cross the road 4 times daily to access alternative pasture. The road safety audit was undertaken on the basis of only a limited number of animals crossing, as at present, not the dairy herd of 150 cows. The planning officer has recommended in condition 6 that the access shall not be used for any additional livestock movements. So it now appears unlikely to be of use to Aggregate Industries anyway. The proposed crossing is at a dangerous location with poor visibility, just over the brow of a hill on a busy 60-mile-an-hour road, the main road into and out of Ottery. The proposed access on the north side would be 45 metres closer to the brow of the hill than the current access. A number of accidents occur along this narrow stretch every year. The road safety audit didn't acknowledge any accidents. The stopping sight distance from the west to the proposed crossing is 55 metres short of the recommended 215 metres for a 60-mile-an-hour road. This stopping distance would only get shorter as more vehicles join the queue. These queuing vehicles would then back up towards the brow of the hill, and drivers would be watching anxiously in their mirrors, anticipating the approach of fast-moving vehicles, unaware of what's ahead. Thank you. The road safety audit didn't assess the impact of queuing traffic and associated dangers. Delays at the crossing would also impede emergency vehicles on the primary access road for Ottery and its hospital. I asked the councillors to refuse this application. It is not required by the farmer. It appears to be of no use to Aggregate Industries. It would interfere with emergency vehicles.
3 minutes is up.
It would introduce increased dangers to the many users of the Exeter Road. Thank you.
Thank you. Clive Tompkins, please. Welcome to the meeting. You had 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors and members, for providing me with the opportunity to address you this afternoon. Aggregate Industries UK and its antecedent companies have been the owners of Straightgate Farm, situated on the northern side of the B3174 Exeter Road near Ottery St Mary's since April 1965. The farm has been let to the same family since then. The farm tenants, via their agent, had informed the company of their requirements to move the dairy herd and other livestock, more particularly described in the application document at paragraph 1.7 of the supporting statement, across the Exeter Road to access other grazing land to the south owned by the tenant's family. The current situation requires livestock to be driven from the existing farm access some 40 to 45 metres in a westerly direction along the Exeter Road before reaching the field gate, accessing the grazing fields on the opposite side of the road. The proposed livestock crossing introduces a new field gate on the Straightgate Farm side of Exeter Road, directly opposite the existing gate on the southern side of the road. The proposal also incorporates holding pens to manage livestock prior to their crossing, which can be used to retain the livestock if the crossing needs to be temporarily suspended. This application seeks planning permission for a new access onto the Exeter Road to provide betterment over the existing situation with a direct crossing from Straightgate Farm to the land south of the road. The proposal vastly improves the existing diagonal crossing point, effectively reducing crossing times, and which improves safety for both the farm tenant and road users when livestock is moved. The County Highway Authority and Highways England has no objection to this proposal on the basis that the frequency and number of livestock movements does not increase above those set out in paragraph 1.7 of the supporting statement, and which has also been conditioned by our own planning officers, should consent be granted. We would therefore ask you to support your officers' recommendation and grant approval for this proposal. Thank you for your attention, and I am happy to take questions.
Thank you. Councillor Roger Giles, Ottery St Mary Town Council, please.
Yeah, well, here. So this application appears to be an attempt to make the road safer for cattle crossing it. So it might appear odd that the West Hill Parish Council and Ottery St Mary Town Council strongly oppose the application, and very many members of the public are vehemently against it. To understand why, it is necessary to consider the bigger picture. The application before you today is, despite what Chris Rose said, part of Aggregate Industries' attempt to create a sand and gravel quarry at Straightgate Farm. AI, as has been said, has a live planning application with Devon County Council at the moment. If that application is successful, it would take away much pasture land from the tenant farmer on the north side of the road, where his milking parlour is, and require its relocation to the south side of the road. Crucially, it would require a herd of 150 slow-moving dairy cows to cross the road 4 times a day for most days in the year. Not a chance of an increase, as Chris Rose said, a certainty of a vast increase. Chair and members, you might wonder why this application is before you today and why it does not form part of the larger application which Devon County Council is currently considering. You might think that it is an ingenious or even a devious device by AI to aid their quarry objective. The planning application, as been said, has been submitted by AI, not by the farmer and not on behalf of the farmer. Members, please consider the wider picture and the implications of approving the application before you today. Contrary to the impression given, such an approval would very likely considerably increase the dangers and disruption to the very many users of the B3174 road. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. Now, Councillor Peter Faithful, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure I've got much more to say than what has been said already, but I go back to the concern I have with its proximity to the Blind Summit. When you're coming in from Daisy Mount Junction off the dual carriageway, there's a substantial drop in the road with a Blind Summit, and then you come down to this part of the road. So you get fast moving traffic coming down that road at that point, and to me, it's extremely dangerous. The comment, the rest of it, to me, it's lack of justification. The majority of the farming, the dairy farming, is taking place north of the road. My understanding is that most of what's going on south of the road is like smaller quantities of cattle, and they bringing them across at their own time, so it's not dictated by milking time. So I can't see the justification. Unless, of course, you go back to the comment of the quarry and say it's not related. Well, it's difficult to say that it isn't. This is put down as a minor planning application, but it's a potential to a very major one. The justification for having it there is if the land north of the A30, the Ottery Road, Exeter Road, becomes unavailable, and the vast majority of the farming is taking place north, where the milking parlour and all the cows are kept. I can't see the justification. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Faithful. Councillor Bailey.
Hello, can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. So, as a district councillor for the ward and the county councillor, I am very concerned about this application. When it was first submitted, it was a proposal for a livestock crossing over the B3174 Exeter Road, and the supporting statement said the application proposal comprises the constructing of a new agricultural access to facilitate an efficient crossing point for the current dairy herd at Straightgate. And this sounds really straightforward, but as others have mentioned, it isn't. There's the live planning application at Devon County Council for the quarry, which has been live for 4 years. It was submitted in 2017. And I am concerned about a disaggregated approach, so the applications are being dealt with separately, with Devon County Council dealing with the main quarry and EDDC dealing with this application, even though the cattle crossing has been an important consideration of the main quarry application for many years. When this application for the crossing came in, I objected as it was submitted in a form that would allow unlimited crossing of the dairy cattle. And so I don't accept that it's unrelated to the quarry application. However, what has happened since is important. 2 key consultees on this planning application, Highways England, who are responsible for the A30, which is only 800 metres away, and Devon County Council, who are responsible for the B3174, have not formally objected. However, they have in all but name objected, because actually they've both made it absolutely clear that there can be no increase on the existing minimal dairy cattle movements because of the major road safety issues. So Highways England and Devon County Council are relying on EDDC as the planning authority to ensure that if it grants consent, there will be no intensification of use, because any such intensification would put road users in serious danger, both on the B3174 and the A30. And I pulled off the collision data, which has been recently released by Devon County Council for this road, and it is dire. There were 4 separate collisions in 2020 alone, causing personal injuries. 2 of these accidents were categorised as serious, and there were 7 casualties in total. So my question to the planning committee today is, can you be 100% confident that this condition, and I'm talking about condition 6, can be monitored and enforced, because it's absolutely essential. It's essential to Highways England and it's essential to Devon County Council. And I would urge you to look very closely at this condition, and if there's even a scintilla of doubt in your mind, then this application must be refused. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask Mr. Rose, please, about condition 6? Can that be monitored, please? Or would it be? How would it?
Yeah, so we have officers that go out that way very regularly, but yes, the enforcement officer for the area can monitor that. We will, to some extent as well, be reliant on members of the public, but at any time we can contact the applicant and check out and ensure that that condition is enforced. So yes, I'm happy that it meets the test, and we can follow that up if needs be.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm sure there would be many members of the public who would be happy to report any additional use. Right now, Councillor Johns, I think, Sarah, you've got a statement to read out.
Yes, I have, Chair. Statement from Councillor Vicky Johns. As one of the councillors for this ward, I strongly object to this application on the following grounds. The B3174 is a busy road and is the primary route in and out of Ottery St Mary. It is particularly busy during morning and afternoon commuting hours. This section of road is notorious for road accidents, including a fatal collision a few years ago. There was also an incident a few days ago where a lorry overturned, causing large tailbacks and various issues for some time. Thankfully, no one was seriously injured. The stopping sight distance to the west is below the required minimum. The proposed crossing is close to the brow of a hill, and roadside trees also reduce visibility. The proposed signage, a warning sign 548 cattle, situated 35 metres either side of the proposed crossing, gives inadequate warning for approaching traffic travelling at 60 miles an hour. The current usage of the crossing, as detailed in para 1.7 of the supporting statement, is infrequent, and timing is adjusted to coincide with quieter times when traffic flow is at its lowest. However, as is admitted in paragraph 4.3 and 6.2 of the supporting statement, the proposed crossing is to facilitate a crossing point for the dairy herd at Straightgate Farm. If quarrying begins at Straightgate Farm, application DCC/3944/2017, yet to be determined, around 90% of the pasture on the north side of the B3174 will no longer be available for the dairy herd. They will have to use replacement pasture on the south side of the B3174 and will need to cross the B3174 4 times a day to and from the milking parlour at Straightgate Farm. The time taken for each crossing is stated to be 45 to 60 minutes and needs to occur at 7:30 a.m, 10 a.m, and in the afternoon around 5:30 p.m. This is an entirely different situation and usage which has not been properly assessed. The dairy herd crossing would block the road for significant periods of time during the peak morning and afternoon traffic flows. This would cause unacceptable delays to traffic in and out of Ottery St Mary. Also, there would be significant problems with mud and muck being deposited on the road, which would cause additional safety hazards. Councillors considered that the impact from frequent dairy herd crossings would be unacceptable. If the planning authority is minded to approve the application, councillors request that the speed limit of the B3174 should be reduced to 40 miles an hour. Also, there should be improved signage with traffic lights and advanced warning signs. This road is the main road into and out of Ottery towards Exeter. It is the busiest road and is busy at all times, with buses alone coming every half hour in both directions. The idea of stopping traffic for a few minutes to allow cattle to cross may seem simple, but in reality, it would cause the traffic to come to a complete standstill for quite some time, causing the only public transport from Ottery to end up running late, causing a knock-on effect. As the main road is also the quickest road from Ottery to the hospital, the thought of ambulances getting caught up in tailbacks is awful and doesn't bear thinking about. A few minutes can literally be the difference between life and death. Due to the nature of the road with a steep blind brow, it would be impossible for vehicles to overtake, which we all know would happen when people are getting irate. Ottery as a town has grown considerably in the last few years, and so has the volume of traffic. With all of the information I have in front of me, I strongly object to this application and hope that the Planning Committee at EDDC agrees. I do, of course, retain the right to change my view if further information is provided. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Regarding speed limits on the roads, that can be taken to the Highways and Traffic Orders Committee of Devon County Council. Right, Councillor Pratt, you have as long as you like, but I think much has been covered already. I think you'd agree, but please carry on.
Thank you. The situation regarding the dairy herd, occasionally the dairy herd has crossed the road, but it takes 60 minutes, and this is in the supporting statement at section 1.7. 4 times a day they have to cross. This is a milking herd, and then it's on page 35, Councillor Key, if you want to read it there. But after 60 minutes, 4 times per day, and that works out at 4 hours a day. Now, this only happens occasionally, and they say it's 3 times per year at the moment. So just imagine if this dairy herd is going to be crossing that road 7 days a week for 4 hours a day. That is a considerable hurdle to get over, isn't it? It would cause chaos on that road. It's a very busy road, as many of the councillors have already said. It's an HGV authorised route into Ottery St Mary. There has been a fatal accident there back in June 2016, but last year there were 4 serious accidents. In 2019, 5 serious accidents where the emergency services were called out on each of those occasions. This is a very serious matter as far as road safety is concerned. Nothing in the road safety audit report about road safety. Amazing. The situation then is condition 6 of the proposed order, and I think what we do need is an amendment to clause 6 to cover the monitoring of this crossing by the EDC officers. I think that must go in. So I can leave it there. leave it with you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pratt. Well, Mr. Rose has already said that officers will be going out there and monitoring it, but you're asking for it to be written in.
I would like it in writing in your in condition 6. Yes, certainly.
Okay, thank you. Right, members. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I got a couple of questions. I don't know if Mr. Rose, I've worked with cattle for 61 years nearly, even as a young boy, and I can't quite get my head around going across this road here, 150 cows, it takes up to an hour. What they doing on 2 legs are they or something, or what? I don't know. Well, they hopping across, or I mean, it's just, I mean, so anyway, without me putting my view on it, Mr. Rose, I wonder if it was at all possible, if you could shed a bit of light on how it takes 60 minutes to cross this road with 150 cows. Because I'm sure Councillor Key is nearly going to come in behind me and he's going to have another pop because he's milked cows for God knows how many years. So, Mr. Rose, is that possible?
Well, I've not experienced it myself. I mean, all I can do is point you to the report where it does say that it can take 45 minutes to an hour. Although I think what they're trying to say there is that's because they are having breaks in that time period to allow the vehicles to go through. So they're letting some cow through, then they're stopping the cattle and the cars are going. Then they're stopping it again, and then the cattle are going. So that's why it's taking that period of time. But I wouldn't know. I've never crossed the road with 150 cattle, so you'll be better placed than me to know how long that takes.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Rose, because I have, and I've done that on one occasion. What I might say to that is, and actually it points to the whole thing, actually, Madam Chair, is they're talking about having holding pens, and they're talking about having the cattle at the moment are going up the road so many meters and all the rest of it. So they're coming out of the gate. You can imagine dairy cows coming out of the gate, they're turtling up the road, and then some vehicles come along. And so it's taken some considerable time because of the position they're in at the moment. The fact of the matter is that this is going to be nothing but an improvement because they're going to have the gateways opposite one another. They're going to have holding pens on one side. So as they start going out of the field, no doubt they're going to try to get the cattle. No farmer wants to be sat in the middle of the road with his cattle for an hour with traffic. Nobody wants to do that. They want to get their cattle across the road swiftly and as safely as possible. So that's the first issue. So take that on board. So to me, this is nothing but an improvement. Secondly, I want to pick up on almost every member that has spoken here, other than Councillor Pratt, who didn't mention it, but most of the other, should I say, objectors to this application have all mentioned about an underlying stealth type of application of which this is about, not about this, it's about something else. I can't work with this conspiracy theory, Madam Chair. I have to work on the application and the evidence that is absolutely in front of me. I absolutely agree that if members have something to add that is evidence that hasn't been picked up and to look at, then I'm quite happy to look at that and have a discussion about it. But it's clear to me that lots of the reasoning behind members that have spoken earlier, previously, is all about aggregate industries and their quarrying expeditions of what they want to do. That's a county matter. That's not for us to discuss here today. What we're looking at, Mr. Rose has made it absolutely clear on more than one occasion, we are talking about this application as a form of traffic safety to get cattle from one side of the road to the other on a very busy road. And as far as I'm concerned, I have no issues with any of this, Madam Chair. I'm going to support the officer's recommendation of approval, and I cannot move into the conspiracy theory of what else may or may not be going on with an application. This is what's in front of us. There doesn't seem to be any evidence saying contrary to that opinion, and the the bit about getting the cows across the road for 60 minutes, that would be speeded up to at least a third, if not less. And I'm sure Councillor Key will add some flavour to that. Thank you very much. I'm recommending the officer's recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Is there a
And
seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Key, would like to speak?
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I mean, I reckon they must have been carrying these cows across one at a time. Now, I can tell you in actual fact that on Sunday, I helped my neighbour cross the A30 with 62 dry cows, and it took about 3 minutes. So where they've got these figures from, I have no idea at all. Now, I mean, if you've got actually the holding pens, that is going to speed things up. And this road here is nowhere near as dangerous as the A30, the 303, where I live. And I have 4 farmers, in actual fact, that cross the road quite regularly with cows, and I've never had an accident yet. One of them, in actual fact, he takes 450 cows across the road, and that wouldn't take an hour. So I can't see any problems with this whatsoever. But by having the holding pens, it is going to just speed up a little bit, the actual crossing over, because once you've got them there, then you've got them all together and to get there without any problem. Somebody mentioned about the number of accidents. Well, where I live, in actual fact, is about half a mile from the nearest farm there, and on a crossroad, and they said they'd had sort of, I think, what was it, 4 accidents? Well, where I live, there's been 111 accidents, 11 fatalities, but only those 11 have been recorded to the police. The rest of them have never been recorded, and they won't record them. So, I mean, I've no problem at all with this. The actual gravel or sand or whatever is going to be excavated there will take off the land that the cattle graze now, but it's not going to actually take the buildings where their parlour is. So they will still need the parlour there, and so we'll need that crossing anyway. There is absolutely no problem at all. In actual fact, if somebody wanted, they could walk cattle from one end of that road to the other, and nobody could stop them as long as they've got somebody in front and somebody behind. There's no way at all that anybody could stop them, and they could take all day to do it. So with these people that have actually objected to it and say that, you know, and these times, I mean, they're just unbelievable. I just cannot believe that anybody would want to put those times down on paper. It's utterly ridiculous. And I fully support the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howe, please.
I'll try again if any of you can hear me. Thank you very much. This is one of those where we need to work on facts. And the fact of the matter is, there is no grounds for refusal for this at all that won't cost this council money on appeal. Quite simply, already one side of the road has an access at this location, so there's no highway safety worsening because the access is there already that far distant from the brow of the hill. And believe me, I drive this road twice a day, nearly every day at present. So all we're doing is making, and there's no increase, of course, in the amount of cattle crossings or any other crossings proposed. And in fact, we've got a condition to make sure of that. So all we're doing is straightening what is currently a dogleg crossing to a straight crossing, putting in new infrastructure, as has been explained, which can only improve the safety factor. When you add to that the ability, because we now have an application in front of us, that highways have requested signs as well, again, further improving the safety issue. So for one, we need to be quite clear, this does not make the situation worse. In fact, this does the exact opposite. In every shape and form, this improves the safety issue. We cannot, and I'm quite happy to refer to Mrs. Shaw about this, consider another application that is not before us anyway and has not been decided. That would be illegal as far as I understand. And that's why I said my first statement of it would cost us money if this went to appeal. So we need grounds for refusal if anyone wants to refuse it. And there are none. Absolutely none. Then we come to the report. So I'm supporting this, but nevertheless, I do think having looked at this and understanding the local residents, and I fully sympathise with them. They are worried to death about a quarry, but that is not our concern here. But coming back to the conditions, I do think the current movements or the future movements need to be recorded and submitted to us. I think that would make more sense of all cattle, animals, livestock across the road. That would be quite reasonable and due diligence to make sure it is not increasing and everything else. So I have no problem with that. But other than that, I'm exasperated, unfortunately. I know why everyone locally to this is so up in arms, but they are 1 and 1 makes 3, not 1 and 1 makes 2. And as such, we cannot refuse this in any shape or form. So happy to go along. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Councillor Tom Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to say a lot less than I was going to say because Councillor Howe has just covered most of it. People saying or claiming that cattle take an hour to cross the road clearly hadn't read the report. It takes an hour because there are stops to allow the traffic through. I come along the road from Budleigh to Newton Poppleford frequently, and it's a regular event that the cattle cross from Bicton College Farm down to from the milk and parlour down to the road, and the traffic stops for it. The county are proposing that there should be better and more signage. It's easy to quote accident statistics, and you will know that for many years I was a very senior police officer, and one of my areas of command once was the whole traffic policing of Thames Valley Police's area. And accident statistics tell you nothing other than to go and look at why accidents are occurring, because some accidents are just people driving stupidly too fast and running out of road. And again, this has been covered. This crossing will be a shorter crossing. It's a direct crossing, which would considerably speed up the time these poor cattle spend on the road. So I won't say any more other than it's clear from what I've said that I totally support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Now, the other speakers, can you just speak if you've got something to add, please? We've got next Councillor Gazzard.
No, nothing further to add, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Councillor Lawrence, you need to unmute.
Sorry. I think we're missing a bit of a point here, that although I agree that it's good that we can get these cattle across the road quicker, at the moment, they don't cross the road. There are no cattle crossing that road. I've driven up and down that road for 5 years. I've never, ever been held up by cattle crossing the road. This is all going to be additional cattle crossing the road to access pasture, which they don't access at the moment. So this is why they're saying there's going to be a problem with the traffic and the times they're using. So I do understand where it is they're coming from. And I know it's all to do with aggregate industries and everything else, but we're not here to discuss that. But just purely and simply on cattle movements, at the moment, these dairy cattle do not cross the main road. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Oh, Councillor Key, do you have something to add?
Yes. I would just like to pick up on Councillor Lawrence's. I have actually, might have been unfortunate, but I have been going down there when I've had to stop when they've been crossing store cattle across the road. So yes, they do sometimes cross cattle now.
Thank you for
It-
that.
Sorry, could I
it-
just say I was talking purely and simply about the dairy cattle crossing 4 times a day. I'm
Okay.
not saying they don't.
Thank you. Right, go to Mrs. Shaw to sum up. And Mrs. Shaw, the condition that Councillor Pratt asked to be put in, is that feasible?
It hasn't been agreed by the mover and seconder, so therefore the motion doesn't include that at the moment.
No, I thought I'd ask you if it was feasible to be put in, and then we go to the proposer and seconder to ask if they'd agree it.
From my understanding of what Councillor Pratt was proposing, I couldn't understand whether it was going to be the council that monitors it or the applicant that monitors the movements.
Mr. Rose has said that the enforcement officers would monitor it.
Can I help, Chair? I think
Yes, go on.
Councillor Pratt was asking that we actually mention in the condition that we as a council monitor the crossings. We can't do that because one, it's a role that we carry out as a local authority anyway, and secondly, the conditions for the applicant, and that's not something they can control. But what we could do, if this might be related to what Councillor Pratt was asking for, and certainly what Councillor Howe mentioned, was that we could add to condition 6 to ask that requires the applicant to keep a log of the crossings every time they do it, so that we then do have, at our request, we are able to go to them at any time and ask for the records of them. So we are able to do that.
Thank you. Is that acceptable to you, Councillor Skinner, Councillor Key?
Acceptable to me, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, back to you, Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Therefore, members, you've got before you a motion to approve subject to the conditions listed in the report. And I would suggest the exact wording of the additional condition, as just mentioned, for keeping the log is delegated to officers to draft for the log of crossings. So when your name is called, members, please would you indicate whether you're in support of the motion to approve, against the motion to approve, or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. So Councillor Chamberlain.
Support the motion to approve.
Thank you. Councillor Davey has left the meeting and has sent his apologies for the remainder. So we'll move on to Councillor De Saran.
Hi, Wendy. In support of the motion to approve.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Support.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Approve, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Support.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Support.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Support.
Thank you. Councillor Whibley.
Support.
Thank you. Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Support approval, thank you.
Thank you. That's unanimously approved. So unanimously supported. So the vote to approve has been carried.
Thank you, Wendy. I think we'd take one more application and then have a break. That'll take us halfway through the agenda. Agenda item 9, application 1794. It's a variation, major, land at Barton Orchard, Tipton St John, on page 44. And I'd like to welcome to the meeting Paul Humphreys and welcome back Councillor Roger Giles. Right, Chris, can you present your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, just before I start there, we have received 2 further comments from Councillor Johns, reiterating other comments that she's made already that are outlined in the report. So this application is for variation of conditions, and it's to regularise changes to the development that have occurred on site. You can see the location of the site here. It relates to a site called Barton Rise, and it was an exception site that was granted in 2013. So it comprises 10 affordable units and 5 open market houses. And it's on the hillside at Tipton St John in the AONB. It's almost complete, as the photos will show, and I understand the affordable housing units are already occupied, and the changes relate mainly to the landscaping of the site and to some very minor changes to the open market units. Above the site, there's open space. And as I say, there's landscaping changes have been done, some very, very minor design changes to the open markets units, and there's been some drainage implications during construction that have also been picked up as part of this application. So this is the layout for the site. You can see the road comes in and winds up, and then we've got open space above. These 5 large units are the open market ones, and then we have a pair of affordable here, terrace of 3. Then we've got 1 and then 4 flats. So they're the affordable on the site. And so you can see the open space, you can see the landscaping, and you'll see from the photos that the site is on quite a slope. So these are the elevations of the properties. As I say, the elevations changes are, they're barely perceivable if you are comparing the elevations. It's ever so slight changes to door and window sizes. But as I say, to the naked eye, they aren't really visible. If I just move forward to, there are some changes that I will cover that are more significant. So if I move forward to the photo, so we can see the development on the hillside here with the flat roofs. You can see the affordable units, and you can see in particular these open market units that are at the top of the slope and the more visible. And as I run through, again, you can see those units there. These are the open market. This is the affordable. Again, the same picture, and again looking back at those open market units and across the site, so you can start seeing the levels changes and the banks, etc., that have been put in. So the buildings, all the buildings are the same size and the same shape as previously approved. As I say, slight changes to windows sizes on the open market units, but nothing that you can perceive. One of the main changes that happened was that these units were granted originally with living walls. And then during the construction phase, the applicant decided to put up plastic plants up the side of the building, which obviously raised concerns with ourselves and members of the public. And that was then removed from the application. And these elevations now are proposed to be painted green and to have ivy growing up them. And that's considered to be acceptable in itself. There was a proposal equally to remove the green roofs, but that's now been retained. So all of those design changes are now considered to be acceptable. And I think the ivy and the removal of the green roofs caused a lot of concern originally from members and the public and ourselves. With regard to landscaping, there's been lots of negotiation with our landscape architect, which is why the application's taken so long to be dealt with. There has been some increase in some of the private plot sizes, some new retaining walls, but that's now all been agreed with the landscape architect. We have the latest landscaping plans for the site, and he is satisfied with all of those and the levels changes on the proposed, as now proposed, which will improve the appearance of the site. In terms of drainage, there were considerable concerns from the neighbours during construction about what was happening with drainage on the site, and also I think it coincided with the period of poor weather, so there was runoff and mud that was causing issues. But we've also then had to follow that up through with Devon County as the drainage authority, because obviously there's been some changes to levels on the site and to banks. So we've run that past through Devon County, and they are satisfied that the drainage scheme that has been put in on the site is working, is acceptable, will do its job. And also, as the remainder of the planting goes in on the site, that's going to aid the situation as well. So in conclusion, this proposal is for those small design and landscaping amendments to the scheme, but in effect, the scheme remains very similar to that already consented. The applicant has now retained the green roofs and proposing green walls with ivy growing up them to aid the visual impact, to reduce the visual impact of those buildings. The landscaping details have now been agreed with the landscape architect, and the drainage has been agreed with Devon County as the drainage authority. So this variation application is now recommended for approval, subject to conditions and subject to a linking agreement to link this consent with the original Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Paul Humphreys, the agent. I see he's here, but I can't see him. Welcome to the meeting, Paul. You know the score. You've got 3 minutes.
Chair, we might have to contact Mr. Humphreys because he was waiting in the virtual lobby, so he might not be aware the application has started. So could you just bear with us while we try to contact him?
Yes, Wendy, I see his, his square is on the screen.
Yep, Sarah will just give him a call now. Just to advise, Sarah is speaking to him at the moment, so hopefully he'll be joining us shortly. Sorry for the wait, Chair. Hopefully he should be joining us very shortly.
Hello.
Hello, Paul. Welcome to the meeting. You have 3 minutes.
Oh, no, that's fine. Crumbs just about made that in time. No, that's good. You know how I look, so I'll save a bit of carbon and not put my...
I do indeed.
That's fine. So, well, thank you, Madam Chairman and fellow councillors. I would like to point out that the application has been as a result of extensive dialogue between the District Council planning officers and landscape officer and Devon County Flood Risk Management team and our practice, and we're very grateful and thank the officers for that. You will now be aware, therefore, that it has resulted in the officer's support of the application, and I quote, the amended scheme in this application is recognisably of the same character and extent as the scheme that was first granted in 2011. The scale, layout and overall design of the dwellings remain broadly the same, but in the revised scheme, a number of adjustments have been made to the elevations and the landscaping. None of these changes, however, would diminish the overall quality of the scheme or lead to an adverse impact on the AONB. The drainage scheme has been considered in much detail by Devon County Flood Risk team, who accept the submitted details, which should prevent any flooding. In fact, it has prevented all flooding since it's been commissioned of neighbouring properties. That was a concern during the construction phase. The new landscaping scheme will in time soften the development, and grass will return to the hillside to cover the bare earth. It will take a number of years for the development to mature, but this application signals the end of an extensive construction period and the beginning of the integration of the buildings into the landscape. So subject to conditions to secure the implementation of the landscaping, drainage and other matters. The amendments to the previously approved scheme are acceptable, unquote. So subject to conditions to secure the implementation of the landscaping and other matters, the amendments to the previously approved scheme are considered to be acceptable. By way of update for the committee, since the committee report, the 5 open market houses, they are now complete, and 4 out of the 5 are either sold or occupied. So in summary, the officers have carefully considered and assessed all of the issues which have been outlined succinctly and cogently in the report, and
30 seconds remaining.
Approval. So in the absence of firm opinion to go against learned opinion, it should be approved and support the good work of your officers. My clients accept the 12 conditions within the report. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for coming along, Paul. Right, we now have Councillor Roger Giles, Ottery St Mary Town Council.
Thank you, Chair. To say that this planning application has been highly contentious for a long time would be a gross understatement of the actual situation. From the moment the proposals first came forward, there was considerable concern and alarm in the community of Tipton St John. The site is very steeply sloping. People living below it were extremely worried about the implications for them of the development. Regrettably, those anxieties have continued for a very long time. There have been numerous instances during the development period of water cascading downhill and the road becoming a virtual watercourse. And there have been many instances of soil and other debris being washed downhill. The regional planning application was approved by yourselves, earlier members of the committee largely, on the chairman's casting vote. It was an application that was contrary to many of East Devon's planning policies. It was and is a very prominent site within the East Devon AONB. It had the probability of serious adverse visual impact being caused. For anyone who is not familiar with this site, you should look across it to it from Mallett's Close, where you saw a depiction earlier on in the meeting, but from lower down in Mallett's Close. The higher up Mallett's Close you get, the worse it is. And you see what a massive scar, a massive blot on the previously beautiful landscape has been created. To get their planning approval, the developers made a series of claims about building eco-houses that would blend in with the countryside. Having got their permission, they then changed their offer. They failed to comply with the planning conditions applied and have spent years arguing with East Devon District Council officers seeking to get the conditions changed and prolonging the distress of many Tipton people. I think it's deplorable. Chair, the developers have caused anguish and distress to the people of Tipton for a decade. They have behaved disgracefully, in my opinion, and should not be rewarded today for the way that they have abused the planning system. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. Now, Councillor Peter Faithful, ward member.
Thank you,
You
Chair.
have 3 minutes.
I think I have 5 minutes, but I probably won't take that long. This has been an ongoing thing, as Councillor Giles suggested. It is within an area of outstanding natural beauty, and it is quite a scar on the landscape. And to me, painting a wall green and having ivy grow all over it is not the same as having a living wall. A living wall is an actual part of the fabric of the building. Having ivy growing up the side of a house, it won't take much to take the ivy back off again at a later date. So it's not part of the fabric of the building. And ivy, if you know anything about ivy, it gets into cracks and causes structural damage to the building. So I think it's a rather silly idea. There's been substantial, I'm not quite sure how much difference the landscaping will have and how long it will take to have any impact. As Councillor Giles rightly suggested, there's been waterfall, rivers running down that road, and it's carrying silt and blocking the drains. How much of that is from the fact that it's a building site and how much will continue to be a problem once the grass and landscape is completed, and how long it's going to take to get there. It's taken long enough. It's been filling up people's garden ponds and all sorts of things. I really don't like this taking shortcuts on something. This is, as I said, it's within the area of outstanding natural beauty. It's not just next to it. It's part of the area of outstanding natural beauty. They've built in that inside the boundary. But I really want to see the proper living walls, so that they're part of the fabric of the building. So to say they're complete, that they're complete except for the fact that they haven't got living walls, I think it was fine. Anyway, that's it. All I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Faithful. Councillor Johns, I think, Sarah, you have a statement to read.
Yes, I do, Chair. Statement from Councillor Vicky Johns. With regards to this planning application, I cannot support the application as it was originally granted due to the duty of care and green aspects that the developer promised. I feel that the original planning application would not have been granted if the alterations that are now being asked for were in the original application. As a council, I think we should be fighting harder to ensure that developers do as they have stated when their original applications come in, and not allow cheaper, quicker fixes which are not in keeping with the surrounding area. We have a duty of care to the residents of the village, not the developer. So with the information I currently have in front of me, I cannot support this application, and I retain the right to change my views if further information comes to light. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. And now we have Councillor Pratt, as long as you like.
Thank you, Chair. I really want to go back to the original application because the example before you showing the scene from Mallock's Close, you can see that area, which is AONB, was a beautiful green field, which now really is an absolute disgrace in my view. The situation was that under the original agreement approval, there was a condition that a visual screening framework of native species of woodland would be provided to further screen the units, and you can see that is desperately needed in respect of the Mallock Close residents. And that is something which my feelings are that we should reject this application and advise the developer to comply with the conditions as laid out in the original planning application number 112172. So I would propose refusal of this application.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder, please? No.
Chair,
Councillor Whibley?
Sorry, Chair, if I could just interrupt. Are you in debate now, or are you still taking deputations?
No, Councillor Pratt has spoken as ward member, and now we're in debate. He's spoken, he's put a proposal forward. Councillor Whibley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The thing which I found most compelling was the statement from Councillor Johns, where she says if what's currently being proposed was in the original proposal, it would never have got through planning. And I'm not sure, and no doubt Mr. Rose will tell us, you know, if that was a decision the council came to and it were appealed, what the chances of that appeal being successful were. But again, it doesn't feel right that the planning system, which sometimes it feels, you know, set against residents' views already, is being ridden further roughshod over. So I'm almost seconding this as a matter of, it feels like a matter of principle almost. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Whibley. So that's been proposed and seconded. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually torn a little bit on this one, and I didn't jump in and second Councillor Pratt because I don't know on what grounds or how or why what we're going to do. But I do have a tremendous amount of sympathy for the members in what the previous members and speakers were and have been discussing, and I can actually understand. I don't often agree with Councillor Giles, but he is a councillor, he's a town councillor, Councillor Giles. But on this occasion, I'm looking at that from this photo, which Mr. Rose has put up, and it doesn't look like it's very fitting at all in the area, and there's obviously been ongoing issues and problems with it. I think taking all that into account, and I very much want to hear what other members have to say, but I think I'm going to have to go forward with approving this application, simply because I don't know why or what grounds we can't really, to be honest with you. And I think just to go against the application, I would be looking for those members who are looking to refuse that application or this application to actually have some sort of sound reasons as to why. And I think what we mustn't do is get blinkered through you, Madam Chair, get blinkered by what has gone on in the past and what we may or may not have done in the past, and that all gets blinkered into what it is. The problem is you can't have the stick out now, because it's really the opportunity is lost and gone, and it's a case of what we're trying to do, and I would imagine what the officers are trying to do is for the benefit of everybody, instead of the mud running down the road and clearing it all up, to get this site finished, to get the drains in, to get the road going, to get everything up and running and going in a proper manner, so as it then becomes a benefit, because what's there we need to get rectified and need to get it put right. So I'm going to go with approval, but I must say I'm doing this, Madam Chair, through you, I'm doing this with almost with gritted teeth, because I feel a little bit that I have lots of sympathy for what has been said. It's just that we sit in planning law, and the planning law is what the planning law is, and it is very difficult just to say I don't like that because I don't like it, and certainly we shouldn't be working on that premise, but it sounds a little bit like that's what we're going to be looking to do, and we can't work with that, and that's quite clear. And I can't see, and I've thought about it quite a bit, and I really don't see on what grounds we think we would have for refusing this application. And in actual fact, Madam Chair, you'd have to say to yourself, and what benefit would that bring? And I can't see any. So on that basis, I'm going to move the recommendation of approval. But as I say, I'm doing this with a bit of a heavy heart in one aspect, but I don't see what else we can really do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. You can't actually move the recommendation for approval because there's already been proposal to refuse. Councillor Pratt, the point's been made. On what grounds are you recommending refusal, please? Policy grounds? Can you use your microphone?
It seems to be in breach of strategy 46 of the local plan relating to landscape conservation and enhancement and AONBs.
Could I, through you, Chair, could we ask Mr. Rose what he thinks?
Yeah, I was just going to go to it. I was just looking up the policy actually, and I think it's probably subjective, because what one person might think enhances, another one might think is not appropriate. Mr. Rose, could we go to you for some advice on this, please? How would strategy 46 tackle?
So let me go back a bit first, which is the the images you're seeing at the moment are the site without the landscaping complete. So I think that don't be misled in terms of what the scheme will look like at the end compared to what it is now. And there's been years worth of involvement from the landscape architect to make sure that the landscaping scheme is as good, if not better, than the one that was originally granted. And it's only taken into account those slight banks and minor changes that you can't really perceive in this photo. And you'll note condition 2 on the consent is saying that they have to have all that landscaping in by the end of this year to make sure it's done this planting season. So I don't think there's anything landscape in terms that we're looking at this time that wouldn't have been granted originally. As I said, the design changes you can't even really perceive. So again, they would have been granted last time, I'm sure. And then we come to the drainage, which it really has been an issue for those adjoining residents. But during the construction period, there was runoff. It was a horrible winter. But those issues are now resolved because the drainage scheme is in on site, and Devon County as a drainage authority are happy with that scheme and it is working. So where we come back to then in terms of the changes with the original consent are in relation to this living wall. So on these 2 units where you can perceive in particular, and you can see the green at the back, Wood is proposing a green wall with ivy running up in it so much more harmful or any worse at all than the living walls that were originally granted. Our view as officers is no, it's not any more harmful and therefore it's acceptable. But if members felt that that in itself was the reason and the harmful impact on the AONB, then yes, strategy 46 would be that reason. But we're going to have to convince an inspector that from various views around there, having a wall with ivy growing up it is going to be significantly worse than a living wall. And I think that might be a hard argument. Thank you.
Well, going back to the point that Councillor Faithful made, that ivy, as we know, it gets in everywhere. It can threaten the structural soundness of a property. What's the difference between ivy and the living wall?
Well, you'll have to make that judgment. I mean, ivy will also grow up. I mean, in effect, what would you have with a living wall? Is you'll in all likelihood, you're going to have wires and timber and that on the outside structure that the plants weave in and grow up and make it more of a living wall. It might it will be greener, whereas in this case, you're going to have ivy growing up it. So I suppose I don't think there's going to be any difference in terms of any impact structurally on the building. Maybe there might be more of a variety in the appearance that you would get from a living wall rather than an ivy wall. But the whole idea of it was to make the upper part of those units greener and have less of an impact. And I think the ivy will do that as much as a living wall. But that's the judgment for you as the members to make.
Thank you. There are several hands up, but I'd like to go to Councillor Chamberlain, please, because of her background in planning. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. This one, listening to it, frustrates me quite a bit. I'm looking at this picture, and if it was to look as it was now with the landscaping coming forward, and that was on a new application in the AONB, would we accept it? No, probably not, because I think it looks awful personally. The main thing with this site when it came forward at the beginning would have been about the fact that it was an eco design. It had the living walls as part of it, which you visually are looking at from the existing properties. What's the difference between ivy growing up a wall and a living wall? Hugely different, massively different. The way it's designed, constructed, the way that it lives and grows, takes in the carbon dioxide, compared to ivy, which will cause structural problems over time. It is hugely different. We're talking about a variation of plants going in with some flowering, colouring, blending into the background, as opposed to a green ivy, something that's going to be detrimental to the building in the future. I'm struggling with this one because I'm quite annoyed that now we're at this space. We're saying, oh, right, okay, well, we really need to get the landscape again. But actually, we're going against the original part was that these properties came forward with the living walls. They were supposed to be great in this area of AONB. And now we're where we are today. Are we just going to say, okay, fine, let's go forward with this because we need to get in the landscape on it quickly? Or actually, no, should we stick by the fact that this was originally granted because there was the eco side of it and the green living wall? So personally, for me, this is, yes, I feel massively for these residents and these issues need sorting out, but I'm not about to sit here and go, okay, yes, because that's easier, let's just put in the landscape. And I know you've worked on it for a long time, but actually the whole point was this was granted by the committee a long time ago for these eco and living wall reasons, or else it would not have been granted in this area of AONB. So I'm sorry, I cannot sit here and go, yeah, that's brilliant, it's going to make it look so much better, because I think that site looks awful as it does at the moment. So we need to stick by what it should originally have been in design and implement that, and then set that example going forward. This is what we want to see. It's not a year down the line, or change your mind and change it. No, this was the design that was agreed on the application, and this is what we should be looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. That was helpful. Right. Councillor De Saram, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just make a couple of quick points. The first point is that I have every sympathy with those who've had experienced construction problems with runoff and drainage issues. As a ward member who's lived through the ongoing saga of Plum Park, I fully understand what it is to have these issues. And I think the next point I'd like to say is that I think everyone agrees that the AONB is very important and should be protected. And I think Councillor Chamberlain made some excellent comments about the original eco design. But I would say that we are now faced with a development almost complete, as it says in the report. The 5 open market houses approved as part of the scheme have yet to be fully occupied, but are finished or nearly finished. So I think we've been presented and put in a very difficult position, because we can't simply go and say demolish it. So I think what we need to do is time for it to settle in and soften. And I appreciate it's been many years to get here, but I think that if we work at the page 65, which says this has been subject to refinement with discussions, but has now reached a stage where it is acceptable and will help with the development blend into the landscape in time. And I think the key message here, Chair, is time to soften it. I appreciate that it has caused a great deal of concern locally, because obviously this has been a long development, but I would like to give it the time it needs to soften and blend in, because I don't think we have any other choice, given the fact that it's a half-finished development. So that's really what I want to say, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to remind members that if permission hasn't been granted, it's a risk that the developer takes. Right, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. I think one of the reasons planning permission was given was we actually did manage to achieve our 66% of affordable housing, which is something that we're all trying to do in our areas of outstanding natural beauty. But I totally concur with what Councillor Chamberlain says, and all that has done actually is highlights the whole problem with planning. We as a planning authority, and I think in common with other planning authorities, grant these planning permissions, then nobody seems to bother to go round to see if what is being built is what is actually planned. And that is repeated constantly, many times a year on many developments. But I'm afraid we are almost impotent. I would agree that ivy gets everywhere, but that's not to say that about all the ivies in the world. But I actually think a lot of what the passion that Councillor Giles brought was that there was totally a great deal of objection to this in principle. They just objected to anything being built on this fairly prominent site. I know the village very well, and I think when you talk about a green wall with growing all sorts of plants up it, what is that going to be when people decide they don't like what's growing up the wall? They're going to grow something else up it. And I do concur with Councillor Desarum that give it time to mellow in. You know, looking at this photograph, it looks like rather like portable caravan units dumped on the site. But, you know, we all know that buildings do mellow, do turn in. Are we going to have any control over what colour the residents in future decide to paint these buildings? I suspect not. And if somebody wants to, didn't we have a councillor that once painted something in a Union Jack and put something growing through the roof? So I think it's in an unfortunate position, but we are in this position because we fail, as many planning authorities fail, to actually go and look at these buildings, and when they're being constructed, and say, hang on, that's not what was planned, you've got to stop it. And until we got a situation where we do that, we're going to be faced with this time and time again. And I think we actually have to just swallow the bitter pill and see if it does mellow over years. But I think the big triumph is in a village like Tipton St John, where the school has been struggling because lack of numbers, to actually get 66% 10 affordable homes in a place like Tipton St John is something that we can be congratulated for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. And if you want to see a colourful property, there's one at the end of St Andrews Road in Exmouth, Ash Hotel. It is vivid green all over. Absolutely. Right. Next one, Councillor Howe.
Thank you very much, Chair. Oh dear. Like Councillor Skinner, I'm torn on this one, really torn. Following on from Councillor Wright, what he said, and he's right.
Is your microphone on?
It is on. It is on, absolutely it's on. Following on from Councillor Wright's comments about 66% affordable, absolutely. That was, I can remember this application, I really can. That's really sad for me in an awful lot of ways. Yeah, well, it's not my fault actually, but there you go. But the affordable was intrinsic about it, but also at the same time was the landscape, the character, and the way the scheme was put together in that 2011 application. And it was supposed to be a renowned scheme because of the way it looked and felt. And now we're coming to the last finer points. And I agree with what everyone else has said, actually. We do need this landscaping done. And I have to commend our officers and our landscape officer in particular for the pages of work he's done in this report, let alone anything else, because he's been at it like a dog with a bone, and he needs to be, because he's been, you know, ever so good. But coming back to the points I wish to make, and it's rare for me, because I do agree with Councillor Giles and the other ward councillors. With a great deal of respect, I don't always agree with Councillor Giles, but we need a pint in the pub for that, I tell you. The point I want to pick up is condition 11. And this is the one that worries me, because a green wall would be permanent. But ivy isn't, and we can only maintain it for 5 years. And we can insist on it for that 5 years, but after that, they can do what they like. They still have to paint the wall physically green, because that is dictated by our conditions. But the planting, the green, the ivy, we can't. Whereas if it was a green wall, whatever we want to call it these days, it would be there in perpetuity unless they came in for a change. And they'd have to go through the planning process, is my understanding. So I'm not happy with the ivy conclusion. I get where Mr. Rose is with his officers. The painting of the green building that we've already have in that picture he's got on the screen does subdue it slightly, but I don't think it subdues it enough, with the slope changes that I think are also vastly different from the original application, and I am really struggling to be able to support this. I want to go for refusal, but at the same time I'm sat there and listening to the comments of the ward members about Tipton wanting this finalised another way, because the landscaping is what's important. And it would. The landscaping would make the biggest difference. But at the same time, should we continuously give in to developers not doing the right thing, and particularly not delivering the applications they've got. Why should we constantly agree something that looks beautiful at application stage and then doesn't look anywhere near as good in reality? And this doesn't. I cannot believe for 1 minute this looks anything close to as good as the original application was. And as such, I really am regretful, but I think I've got to go with refusal along with what's proposed. But I'm open to any other ideas. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Councillor Pratt, you've got your hand up.
Yes, if we refuse this application, we're back then with planting trees. What's wrong with that?
No, I will be asking you which particular part of Strategy 46 you'd be given as reason for refusal, please. I can perhaps see two there. Can you use your microphone, please?
Can you hear me now? Sorry. Yes, subparagraph 1 and 2.
They were the ones that I was referring to. Okay. And the reason for the microphone, although I could hear you, it's the people who are watching online.
Sorry.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Chamberlain. I don't see why, as a council, we allow planning permission to a developer who at a later stage decides he doesn't want to go along with that and he wants to do his own thing to obviously save money and save time and whatever else. And they do know that if they vary from the planning permission that's been granted, it's going to cost them some money to put it right. And I think we ought to have some teeth on a matter like this and bite back and say, you go ahead and do what you were supposed to do in the first place. Painting a wall green and sticking a bit of ivy up is just papering over the cracks as far as I'm concerned, and they should do the job right. Thank you.
Now, Councillor Key and Councillor Skinner, do you have anything to add?
Well, I was just very and that is the fact that ivy is an absolute disaster on any wall, because my daughter, in actual fact, and son-in-law bought a house with ivy on it. It had been there 4 years, and they decided to take it down, and they had to have most of the wall replastered and re-rendered because it had in that short time. So I'm very much against ivy.
I think Councillor Chamberlain gave a very impressive speech, to be honest, and she's actually swayed my opinion from where I was in wanting to make sure as to what we've got. I actually think Strategy 46, in my opinion, from what was said from Mr. Rose, that if you consider from particularly what Councillor Chamberlain said, there is a marked difference between ivy growing up a wall to having a proper planted scheme. We can argue the case and say in years' time, perhaps do people want to take that down or whatever. That's not what's up for debate here today. And I think the case was put forward. So and listening to the others and listening to what's happened, I think I'm going to be going along with the recommendation that's been put forward of refusal, because I just don't think things are right, which will give then an opportunity for the applicants. I take they have another free go. They have the ability to rechange the things they've done, knowing how now we're going to lead. That gives a steer to our officers to say, no, you need to up your game and make it better. So I think taking on balance those two things, perhaps we're in a better place to uphold on what was supposed to have been done in the first place. So let's hold with that one and do that. And I'm going to support Councillor Chamberlain. Well, I think it's Councillor Pratt and Councillor Whibley in their recommendation. Thank you.
And of course, the applicant can also go to appeal, where an inspector will decide if it's refused. Right, over to Mrs. Shaw then to sum up, and strategy 46 points 1 and 2 have been identified as reasons for refusal.
Thank you, Chair. As just mentioned, the motion before you is to refuse, subject to, sorry, I beg your pardon, for the reasons that it fails to conserve and enhance the landscape character of the area and also undermines the landscape quality in the area. Members, when your name is called, please would you indicate whether you support the motion to approve, whether you're against the motion to approve, I do beg your pardon, I will start that again, whether you support the motion to refuse, you're against the motion to refuse, or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. Councillor Chamberlain.
I support the motion. Sorry. Support the motion to refuse. I didn't know if Chris wanted to come back in though quickly. That was all. No, it doesn't know. Right.
Thank you, Councillor Chamberlain. Councillor De Sarum.
Likewise, support motion to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Support the motion to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Support the motion to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
Support refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Support the motion to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Support the motion to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Support the motion to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Whibley.
Support the motion to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Ragg.
Abstain.
Thank you. And Councillor Wright.
Support the motion to refuse.
Thank you. I can confirm the vote to refuse has been carried.
Thank you, Wendy. Right, now it's 20 to 2. Should we have a half-hour break and you eat your sandwiches?
Chair?
Yep.
Chair, before you go,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether to stop the live stream during our lunch break, only because you're all in the council chamber and I'm just concerned with regards to staying muted. So I think it might be advisable if we just stop the live stream and then we'll start. Yeah, is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine, Wendy. Fine. Sure, people don't want to see us eating our sandwiches.
So what time will we be restarting?
10 past 2.
10 past, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks,
you.
Chair.